Chapter 30-55. Lu Yin's expression changed when he saw where the god of forgotten ruins was looking. Bu Wu and the rest also looked over but found nothing. It's not that easy to watch Sister's show. A cold light flashed in the god of forgotten ruins' eyes. He waved his hand and 8 wolf heads came crashing down. Bu Wu's expression changed. Stop. His words had no effect on the god of forgotten ruins. The god of forgotten ruins did not even look at them and headed straight for Lu Yin. Boom boom boom. The stars collapsed as wolf heads covered the limitless empire. Bu Wu raised his right arm and attacked the nearest wolf head. Gu Shan, Lu Ling, Fei Yan, Shang Tianzong, Jiang Dongjian, and the rest of the 10-ring cultivators all attacked. Even so, there were still wolf heads that could not be stopped and crashed down. The limitless empire suffered heavy losses. At the same time, the caged drake returned to its original size. Its huge body swept across and headed towards the limitless empire. Fei Yan was shocked. Commander, it's this creature. Bu Wu destroyed a wolf head and saw the caged drake heading towards them. On the caged drake's back, Lu Yin's expression was solemn. He did not know how badly the god of forgotten ruins was injured in the battle with the grand heavenly masters. Regardless, the god of forgotten ruins was not an opponent that he could handle alone. The strength of the 7 heavenly gods was unforgettable. The Eternals betrayed the undying god and the god of forgotten ruins. The undying god was surrounded and killed while the god of forgotten ruins escaped. Lu Yin was very sure that this woman's cunning was not inferior to her strength. The meditative ruins spread wildly like a continent growing in the starry sky. Little Lu Yin, aren't you looking for sister? Sister is here, why are you running? The god of forgotten ruins' voice was getting closer. Lu Yin looked back. Wang Miao Miao, aren't you afraid that I'll bring people to kill you? I'll try. If I fail, the consequences will be severe. The god of forgotten ruins' smile disappeared and pointed at the meditative ruins under her feet. The meditative ruins shattered and debris flew in all directions. The caged drake was hit and howled in pain. His eyes were dazed for a moment and he forgot everything. Lu Yin kicked the caged drake away and ran on his own. He could not count on this silly thing. Once it was touched by the meditative ruins, it would easily forget everything. It even shrunk its body. At the same time, the meditative ruins' fragments flew towards the limitless empire. Bu Wu clenched his fist and operated his mecha to rush out. He raised his arm and punched out. With a bang, the fragment was reduced to nothingness. However, in an instant his mind went blank. His mecha had been hit by the fragment of the meditative ruins. Even though the mecha had been protected by the protective shield, it was still knocked down. If Bu Wu was like this, the others were even more miserable. With the god of forgotten ruins taking action, the limitless empire did not even have a chance to resist. The meditative ruins made it so that the limitless empire could not even attack. They could only allow themselves to be bombarded. Fei Yan's mind went blank. A wolf head fell down and bit the blue mountain again. With a bang, the blue mountain shattered and Fei Yan, who was inside, died. Before he died, he realized that he had offended an unimaginable civilization for his son. Mecha were shattered one by one and spaceships exploded one after another. It was not a question of whether or not they could block the fragments. Even if they could block one of the meditative ruins fragments, they would forget to block the next attack because they touched the meditative ruins. Whether or not they could survive depended entirely on luck. Shang Ainan's angel mech was smashed in half. Mountain's Skypiercer was the most unlucky. It was torn to pieces by 2 wolf heads and the limitless empire collapsed. Only Bu Wu's mech was undamaged. After all, it was a 12th ring defense. It could not defeat the god of oblivion, but it was not as easy as the meditative ruins. Bu Wu looked at this scene. Just one person was able to wipe out the entire punitive expedition army. 13th ring. This was the power of a 13th ring civilization. Any breakthrough would bring about extreme danger. He knew this very well, but he did not expect to underestimate this civilization. Lu Yin used reverse steps to dodge the attacks of the meditative ruins fragments. He would be finished if he was hit once. The god of oblivion wanted that moment. The god of oblivion sneered, "How long can you hide?" Lu Yin looked back at the god of oblivion. "You think you can kill me? You can't kill me anyway. We've already killed the witch spirit god and the undying god. Oh, I've lived long enough." Lu Yin was helpless. Discovering the 7 sky gods was a good thing, but it had to happen when there were people around. Now that the Tianyi elder was injured, it was impossible for the above heaven to kill the god of oblivion. She definitely had the ability to escape. Contact the Six Direction Society? It was too late. The god of oblivion was not stupid. This woman was smarter than anyone else. The more they did not leave, the more problems there would be. The price to pay to deal with the god of oblivion would be huge. He did not want the above heaven to bear this price, so it could only be the limitless empire. One wolf head after another charged at Lu Yin from all directions, but Lu Yin used the reverse step to parallel time. In an instant everything stopped. He easily swept past the wolf heads and appeared above Bu Wu. As the reverse steps stopped, both the god of oblivion and Bu Wu were in disbelief. Little Lu Yin, you really know how to surprise people. You can even do something like this. You've even touched upon the domain of time, the god of oblivion praised. Bu Wu's eyes flickered. This was troublesome. The humans of this spacetime were actually able to touch upon the domain of time. This was something that the limitless empire could not touch no matter how hard they tried. He had to send this information back. This spacetime could not be left behind. Lu Yin lowered his head and met Bu Wu's eyes. We finally meet. Bu Wu's expression was solemn. You're the one who controlled that creature to capture Xiaoqing and the rest? In the distance, Shang An and Jiang Dongjian and the rest were watching. They were lucky to have not died under the 9 wolves devouring the sky and the meditative ruins, but their mechas could not move. Lu Yin sighed. I don't know if your limitless empire can stop this woman. If not, then you're out of luck. He then turned and headed towards the astral beast domain. Bu Wu's expression changed. This was not good. This person wanted to lure that woman to the empire. The god of oblivion naturally understood the meaning behind Lu Yin's words. Little Lu Yin, do you think you can escape? He then chased after Lu Yin. Bu Wu controlled his mecha and leapt into the air. The empire could not be exposed to this spacetime. This was definitely a special event, and if it was not handled properly, it could bring disaster to the empire. He rushed out of the 6th mainland and arrived at the astral beast domain. He immediately contacted someone in the distance. Activate the nightmare grade record. I repeat, activate the nightmare grade record. In the distance outside the spatial tear, Hong Yan heard Bu Wu's order and her expression changed. She did not hesitate to order, activate the nightmare grade record immediately. The nightmare grade record had only been activated once in the history of the Limitless Empire. At that time, a powerful enemy had invaded the empire and killed Emperor Shang of that generation, almost severing the royal bloodline. Fortunately, the nightmare grade record had allowed the Limitless Empire to escape that disaster, but that disaster had caused their strength to regress by 10,000 years. Hong Yan would never have dreamed that so many experts would activate the nightmare grade record so soon after arriving in this spacetime. Once the crisis was resolved, the empire would analyze that this record had not reached the nightmare grade record, and Bu Wu would have to take responsibility. Given Bu Wu's cautious personality, if he activated it, then it would definitely be useful. In the astral beast domain, Lu Yin headed towards the spatial tear. Almost at the same time that Hong Yan ordered the nightmare grade record to be activated, he also arrived and charged into the tear, not giving the Limitless Empire any time to escape. The next moment, the Forgotten Ruins god arrived as well. He stopped at the spatial tear, rolled his eyes and disappeared. He knew that it was a trap, so why did he still go? He was not stupid. This little Lu Yin was really smart, and he had said that on purpose to force her to leave. She could not go, as going meant that she would be lured into a battle with that mecha civilization. If she did not go, then she would definitely be surrounded by the above sky sect. Little Lu Yin was really cunning. Today's game would end here. The Forgotten Ruins god's appearance brought great pressure to the astral beast domain. His aura suppressed everyone, including the astral beasts, and made it hard for them to breathe. Hong Yan had already despaired, but he had not expected the Forgotten Ruins god to suddenly disappear. He hurriedly shouted, "Has the nightmare grade record been activated?" "My lord, it has been activated." Hong Yan was helpless. If he had known that this terrifying powerhouse would leave, then it would have been better to activate it a little later. However, it had nothing to do with him, as it was Bu Wu who had ordered it to be activated. He looked towards the spatial tear, but what was up with that person who had just charged in? At the same time, Lu Yin charged into the spatial tear, but what he saw was not the Limitless Empire's giant spacecraft, but the Divine Kingdom. Lu Yin was stunned. How had he come to the Divine Kingdom? Coming to the divine kingdom was one thing, but when he looked up he saw that the divine kingdom was trembling. There were cracks everywhere, and in the distance Lu Yin saw a shocking battle. 3 incomparably huge elephants towered between heaven and earth, trampling on the ground of the divine manor country. Golden light palm imprints fell unceasingly, blasting towards a human figure. The human figure held a spear, breaking through the golden palm imprints and piercing forward, piercing through the elephants and dyeing heaven and earth red. Lu Yin turned back, and the spatial tear that he had come from instantly disappeared. Something was wrong. This was the limitless empire's doing. Without much time to think, Lu Yin summoned the 7-star mantis and rushed forward. If he was not wrong, that figure was Di Qiong, one of the eternal race's 3 pillars and 6 limitless. Lu Yin was no match for Di Qiong, but he had no choice but to fight. He could not just ignore the destruction of the divine kingdom and run away. If the divine kingdom had a way to contain Di Qiong, then he would not have been able to attack them. However, how had Di Qiong managed to enter the divine kingdom so quickly? Was it fake that he had not been able to do it before? He could not defeat Di Qiong, and if there was no other way, he could take the goddess and the others to the above heaven sect and kill Di Qiong there. The god of forgotten ruins should not have stayed on the 5th mainland. Rumble. The ground was torn apart and blood splattered across the sky. The goddess' face was pale and the veil on her face was long gone. Beneath her was the enormous gate of many arts. The elephant swung its trunk, sweeping past the closest virtuous rebirth elephant as if it was nothing, and aiming straight for Di Qiong. Di Qiong's spear pierced into the elephant's body. As the elephant swung its trunk, the elephant roared at the sky, and the sequence particles around it suppressed Di Qiong, making it difficult for him to move. Thank you. Desert dust. Brother's tip, I'll give it to you, thank you. Chapter 3056. Di Qiong said arrogantly, I've already seen through you. I'm just using you to train. Now that I've slaughtered the 3 elephants, you can only blame the 6 Paths Guild for suppressing the first zone of disaster and forcing us to help. With that, he loosened his grip on the spear and clenched his hands into fists. Then he let out a low roar. Terrifying pressure formed into a shockwave that swept out in all directions, scattering the great sage transcendence sequence particles. Then he looked up and punched out, shattering the golden palm that had suddenly appeared. Then he turned around and kicked out, colliding with the trunk of the Gate of Arts. Lu Yin's eyelids twitched. Without the sequence laws, Di Qiong had defeated the 3 elephants with his physical strength alone. The goddess was helpless. This was the strength of the 3 pillars and the 6 stars. The goddess was shocked. She had thought that she could still defeat Di Qiong and had decided to leave within 100 years. How could this happen? Di Qiong looked up and his pupils disappeared. This was the eyeless transformation. The eyeless transformation was the highest level of the Corpse King transformation. An ordinary progenitor realm Corpse King could strike fear into the hearts of the sequence laws. For example, the middle plate might not even be able to kill him. Di Qiong was a sequence law master and was comparable to the 7 sky gods. Now that he had used the eyeless transformation, Lu Yin found it hard to breathe. Fortunately, Di Qiong did not pay attention to Lu Yin. Lu Yin was only a demi-ancestor. In the divine kingdom there were a few people at his level. The goddess saw Lu Yin and was surprised. Why was Lu Yin here? Lu Yin gestured for the goddess to keep quiet and flew toward Di Qiong with the speed of a demi-ancestor. It seemed that he was not afraid of death. The supreme sage elephant charged toward Di Qiong. However, Di Qiong blocked it with one hand. I knew a long time ago that the Akalanatha Heavenly King Elephant was not in the Divine Kingdom. I know where it is. The goddess was shocked. You know where the Akalanatha Heavenly King Elephant is? Di Qiong held back the Supreme Sage Elephant. He exerted force with his finger and pierced it into the Supreme Sage Elephant's body. Boom. Something happened inside the Supreme Sage Elephant's body. The Supreme Sage Elephant spat out a mouthful of blood and slowly fell to the ground. The Akalanatha Heavenly King Elephant came from the other side. The goddess's eyes flickered as she watched the reborn elephant of Duan being defeated by Di Qiong. Di Qiong was a monster who had been teasing the Divine Land Nation for so many years. She had thought that the Divine Land Nation would be able to stop this monster. Let's run. A voice sounded by the goddess' ears. It was the Gate of Method's image. It could see through the void, confident in bringing the goddess away. However, this divine manor country would be abandoned. The goddess stared at Di Qiong from afar. Di Qiong looked at her with interest. Why? Don't you want to know where the Akalanatha celestial king elephant is? You caught it? This was the only thing the goddess could think of. Di Qiong sneered. It's in the primordial space in a place called the Daoist sect. The goddess suddenly looked at Lu Yin. The primordial space, the Daoist sect? Wasn't that where Lu Yin and the others were? When Lu Yin heard Di Qiong mention the Daoist sect, he knew that something was amiss. The goddess knew that they had come from the primordial space and she had also heard of the Daoist sect. As expected, the goddess immediately looked at him. Di Qiong frowned and looked at Lu Yin at the same time. He had only mentioned the starting space and the Daoist sect to tease the divine lady, as she should not have heard of this name. However, when he mentioned this name, the first thing she looked at was that piece of trash who had rushed towards her as if he had a death wish. That piece of trash had already rushed towards her, and Di Qiong had not even bothered to pay attention to him. Lu Yin sighed. This was fate. He could have used a sneak attack or at least hit Di Qiong with his slipper, but the goddess had ruined his plan. The goddess was born in the Divine Manor country and did not know much about the outside world. If she had not been recognized by the Divine Manor country, she would not have been able to borrow the power of the four symbols, let alone fight against Di Qiong. She had the world's top combat power, but she did not have the experience to match it. If she had been an experienced cultivator, she would not have exposed Lu Yin's uniqueness. Since he had been exposed, then he would fight. Reverse step and parallel time. At the same time, Lu Yin said to the goddess, "Prepare to escape. Go to the place where I left the coordinates. Only there can we kill Di Qiong and bring the Divine Manor country's last hope." Although the goddess did not have much combat experience, she was not stupid. She had just realized what was going on. Now that she heard Lu Yin's words, she decisively ordered the person who had followed Lu Yin to the Eternal Kingdom to tear through the void. Although she did not want to participate in the war between the Six-Party Society and the Eternals, Di Qiong and the Six-Party Society were mortal enemies. The Divine Manor country was already in such a state, so how bad could it be? As long as there was a chance, she had to save the Divine Manor country. Everything around them became still. Under the parallel time, Lu Yin hit Di Qiong with his slipper. This time, it hit the back of Di Qiong's head and sent him crashing into the ground. Lu Yin did not expect things to go so smoothly either. It was so smooth that it was unbelievable. His slippers had never successfully slapped an expert at the level of the 7 sky gods before. Even the 7-star mantis would be wary of his slippers and try its best to avoid them. How could Di Qiong not be able to avoid Lu Yin's reverse step? If that was the case, it would be useless no matter how strong San Qing and Lu Hao's bodies were. Lu Yin continued to use reverse step to chase after Di Qiong and hit him with his slipper. With a loud bang, Di Qiong was sent crashing into the ground. Lu Yin followed closely behind and hit him with his slipper. Suddenly, everything around them changed. Lu Yin's action of hitting the slipper was inexplicably restrained by an indescribable force. He was frozen in place. In front of him was Di Qiong's cold, pupilless eyes. Around him were pages of paper. It was as if he had left the Divine Manor country and appeared in a new place. Was this the ancestral world? On one of the pages, a movement that was exactly the same as Lu Yin's movement appeared. It emitted a faint light. Lu Yin looked at it in confusion. What happened? You are not from the Divine Manor country. Di Qiong's voice was deep and cold. The back of his head was hurting. How many years had it been? How many years had it been since he had last felt pain? This person had actually hit him and hurt him with a slipper? Di Qiong was furious when he saw the slipper in Lu Yin's hand. It looked familiar. He felt humiliated. You are courting death. Lu Yin's expression changed. He hurriedly used reverse step to retreat. He realized that he could not hit the slipper off, but he could move back if he wanted to. Could it be that he could do something different from what was on the page, but he could not do something similar? Was there such an ancestral world? Parallel time forced Lu Yin to retreat continuously. Di Qiong's movements were frozen. Lu Yin tried to hit the slipper again, but he was still frozen. The power of time. Kid, who are you? Di Qiong raised his hand and a spear flew from afar towards Lu Yin. The entire Divine Manor country was collapsing and countless people were wailing in pain. Lu Yin knew that he could not do anything to Di Qiong. He used reverse step to go to the goddess. Not far from the goddess, the void cracked open. It was the kingdom of eternity. Let's go. Lu Yin shouted and took the lead. The goddess gritted her teeth and rushed over as well. The three elephants shrank their bodies and endured their injuries as they rushed towards the void crack. Behind him, Di Qiong waved his hand and tore open the sky of the divine dwelling nation. He took a step forward and appeared next to the crack in the void. He entered the crack without hesitation. For him, there was nothing in the universe that could threaten him. Moreover, that brat had to die. The back of his head was hurting. Under the state of the eyeless transformation, he knew that even the 3 masters and 6 heroes would not be able to hurt him. What was wrong with that brat's slipper? It almost cracked his head and he felt like he had seen it somewhere before. Through the void crack, Lu Yin returned to the kingdom of eternity. He immediately sent someone to inform the above heaven sect and ask Big Sis, Elder Chan and Lu Tianyi for help. They did not want to kill Di Qiong, but they wanted him to at least retreat. It was a pity. If Tianyi and the others had not been injured in the first battle of Disaster Zone, they would have been able to kill Di Qiong. Now even if Tianyi and the others came, they would not be able to stop Di Qiong from leaving. The goddess and the 3 elephants rushed through the void crack. Di Qiong rushed out and met Lu Yin's 100 fists head-on. Di Qiong also raised his hand and punched out. He was not afraid of anyone when it came to physical strength. With a bang, the kingdom of eternity shook. Many people looked up and saw a shocking scene. The sky of the kingdom of eternity had turned dark. Lu Yin dodged to the side and was blasted out of the void world. His forehead was covered in cold sweat. He was no match for Di Qiong. Di Qiong was shocked. You can actually dodge my punch. Your punch was not bad. Kid, who are you? The goddess attacked with a palm of light. The 3 elephants were heavily injured and could not attack. Di Qiong raised his spear and pierced through the palm. The goddess was no longer attractive to him. He stared at Lu Yin curiously. This person was not even an extreme powerhouse, but he was able to display such strength. Even a sequence low realm powerhouse might not be able to withstand it. Was there such a person in the universe? Suddenly his expression changed. You are Lu Yin. If there was a half-ancestor in the universe who could shake a sequence low realm powerhouse, there was only one person who could think of in this era. Lu Yin. Di Qiong had never seen Lu Yin before. They had not participated in the first war of tragedy, but they had heard of Lu Yin's name. As one of the 3 pillars and 6 heroes, they had been shocked by Lu Yin's achievements. Now Di Qiong was able to guess who else besides Lu Yin could have accomplished such a feat. Lu Yin did not intend to hide it. The commander appointment platform appeared. Di Qiong, which disaster realm's master are you? Di Qiong stared at Lu Yin in a daze and then laughed. You are really Lu Yin. Interesting. The first disaster realm was forced into hiding by you and had no choice but to seek reinforcements from the other disaster realms. The reason I wanted to destroy the divine kingdom was because I did not have time to waste with them. I was also afraid that they would escape, so I might as well destroy them first. I did not expect to meet you here. You indeed live up to your ancestors' evaluation. But no matter what, you still have to die. How can you stop me alone? I did what the first disaster realm could not do. Interesting. Di Qiong raised his spear and smashed it towards Lu Yin. The spear pierced through the void and reached Lu Yin in an instant. A 7-star mantis appeared below Lu Yin and spread its 6 wings. Thank you. Book friend 4689933 Brothers Reward. I'll give it to you, thank you. Chapter 3057. The 7-star mantis dodged the spear at a speed faster than the speed of time and flew towards Di Qiong. Lu Yin unleashed 100 confinement punches on the mantis' back with a bang, but it only managed to make the mantis move slightly. Lu Yin gritted his teeth and continued to throw punches. He refused to believe that he could not break through Di Qiong's defenses. However, after dozens of punches, Lu Yin's arms were numb, and Di Qiong was only pushed back dozens of meters. Di Qiong was like a towering mountain that Lu Yin couldn't do anything about. He could only take out the slippers again. Di Qiong turned around and stared at Lu Yin. Di Qiong might not have mastered the power of time, but at his level the grand force of time was no longer a force that couldn't be countered. How many more punches do you want? Di Qiong's eyeless eyes sent chills down Lu Yin's spine. The mantis charged towards Di Qiong and Lu Yin slammed the slippers down. The surrounding pages appeared again. Among the pages, one of them was emitting a faint glow. It was the paper that Lu Yin was holding the slipper on. As the paper appeared, Lu Yin stopped moving again. Fortunately, the 7-star mantis was not affected. It brought Lu Yin past Di Qiong and was only a few meters away from him. Lu Yin could clearly see Di Qiong's clenched fist and the returning spear in the distance. Above their heads, the palm of light pressed down and countless particles spread out. The three divinities tried their best, but Di Qiong's spear rendered them useless. Di Qiong's eyes widened. The paper that surrounded them suddenly spread out and swept past Lu Yin, the goddess, and the three divine beasts. It almost covered the entire kingdom of eternity. The paper glowed brightly. There were pictures of Lu Yin holding a pair of slippers, the goddess using the power of the four divine beasts, the three divine beasts, and Lu Yin riding a seven-star mantis. Lu Yin and the rest couldn't move at all. Lu Yin was shocked. What kind of ancestral world was this? How could it be so unbreakable? Di Qiong sneered and stabbed his spear at Lu Yin. Lu Yin hurriedly recalled the seven-star praying mantis before he could move again. He instantly released the starry sky in his heart, and at the same time he summoned Still Void and the other progenitors. One by one the progenitors blocked Di Qiong's path. Di Qiong was stunned. This was the Lu family's general appointment platform? It was indeed mysterious, but it was useless. Under the spear, the ancestor realm experts were scattered one by one. The last one was Silent Void. He did not even have the chance to resist the returning Void Palm and was also scattered. In front of them was the halo of the world of nothingness. Di Qiong's spear pierced forward, and the world of nothingness intertwined with the current space-time, producing a tearing force that even Di Qiong was wary of. However, the spear still continued to stab steadily towards Lu Yin. Lu Yin watched as the spear drew closer and closer until it was almost right in front of him. He took out the Perpetual Darkness card and slapped it towards Di Qiong. Di Qiong was instantly absorbed into the card. Eternal Darkness represented the Grand Elder of the Lost Clan. He was an expert close to the primordial realm, so he could obviously suck Di Qiong in. However, Di Qiong had only been in the Eternal Darkness for less than a second before he rushed out again. The Eternal Darkness could not trap him at all. However, this was exactly what Lu Yin wanted. When Di Qiong dashed out again, red spider lilies bloomed under his feet. Big Sister had arrived. The red spider lilies closed and tried to swallow Di Qiong. Di Qiong frowned and waved his spear, tearing the red spider lilies apart. Big Sister shouted, "Isn't it the god of forgotten ruins? Where did this bastard come from? How dare he cause trouble here?" The giant Pluto appeared and grabbed Di Qiong with one hand. His arm was entwined with sequence particles that constantly distorted the void. Di Qiong looked back. A master of sequence laws? These people must have been the ones who had entered the first zone of disaster. He raised his hand and attacked the Pluto's palm. Boom. The world turned upside down and the Pluto's arm that was wrapped with sequence particles was shattered. Big Sister took a step back and was shocked. Where did this freak come from? Be careful. His physical strength is extremely strong, Lu Yin reminded her. Let's see how his mortal world is like. The crazy Dean Zhou Xian had arrived and looked at Di Qiong from afar. Lu Yin did not know what he had done, but Di Qiong's gaze was unfocused. Was this someone else's experience? A master who had walked his own path could not be left alive. Di Qiong was too strong. Even though he was affected by the crazy Dean, he could not stop his attack. The spear continued to stab towards Lu Yin. At the same time, another spear appeared and stabbed towards the crazy Dean. Elder Zen and senior brother Qing Ping had arrived. Elder Zen transformed into the ancestral chi of the three sons and drew out Patriarch Tianyi. He pointed at Di Qiong and broke the spear in front of him. At the same time, Qing Ping's expression turned solemn, as if he was trying to decide what to do. Lu Yin used the reverse step and retreated step by step. Below him, the paramount sage elephant roared and charged towards him. Everyone worked together to force Di Qiong back. Di Qiong was especially wary of Patriarch Tianyi's finger that Elder Zen had conjured. Lu Yin panted heavily. This was the true strength of the seven sky gods. Without someone like Patriarch Tianyi, they would not have been able to kill him. Di Qiong's expression turned gloomy. The six-way gang could enter the first zone of disaster, and it was said that the ancient gods and ancestors of the past had participated in the battle. This meant that the six-way gang had powerhouses that were comparable to them. Although Di Qiong was confident that he was invincible, he still had to be careful if he encountered such a powerhouse. Although an ant was weak, it could still kill an elephant. Di Qiong scanned the crowd and decided not to waste any more time. He gripped his spear tightly and suddenly stared at Lu Yin. He took a step forward and killed this person. Big Sis and the others all attacked, but this time, Di Qiong did not even look at them. His gaze was fixed on Lu Yin. It was still the same spear. It looked simple, but it could destroy anything. Lu Yin's scalp went numb. At this moment, the threat that Di Qiong posed to him skyrocketed. He saw sequence particles appear around Di Qiong and he used his sequence laws. Big Sis' attack was the first to reach him. Di Qiong did not dodge or block, allowing the attack to land. However, the attack went past Di Qiong's body and hit the ground, tearing apart the deathly aura. At the same time, Patriarch Tianyi, who had been conjured by Elder Zen, pointed at the ground. Their attacks were useless. Di Qiong seemed to be standing on top of the dome and any attacks could only land on the ground. They could not attack him. In Lu Yin's eyes, the spear was getting closer and closer. Judgment, near or far? I choose far. Qing Ping's voice rang out. At the same time, the scales appeared beneath Qing Ping's feet and Di Qiong's feet respectively. The scales appeared beneath Di Qiong's body and did not contradict his sequence laws. But what the hell was near or far? Di Qiong saw himself being pulled up into the sky by the scales. He turned around and looked at Qing Ping in shock. Lu Yin heard it too. Di Qiong did not know Senior Qing Ping, so he did not react immediately. However, Lu Yin knew that the rules of Senior Qing Ping's trial were equally disgusting. He chose to be far, which meant that the further he was from Di Qiong, the more advantageous the trial would be for him. On the contrary, the closer Di Qiong was to him, the more disadvantageous it would be for him. Now that Di Qiong wanted to kill Lu Yin, he was getting further and further away from Qing Ping. The outcome of the trial would be disadvantageous to Di Qiong, and he would be pulled up into the sky. The rules of the trial were fair and could even be said to be advantageous for Di Qiong. He only wanted to be close to Senior Qing Ping. That would be enough. However, he wanted to kill Lu Yin. Senior Qing Ping's trial was purely to save Lu Yin. If Di Qiong wanted to kill Senior Qing Ping, Senior Qing Ping would not only face Di Qiong's attack, but also the outcome of the trial. Senior brother. Lu Yin's heart trembled. Di Qiong was completely enraged when he was pulled up into the sky by the trial. Majestic sequence particles burst out and suppressed the sky. They broke the scales and caused Qing Ping to vomit blood and retreat. Lu Yin took out the Grim Reaper's left arm, held Go Lian and slashed at Di Qiong. There was a deathly aura below. Di Qiong's body was surrounded by a vast number of sequence particles, isolating him from everything. The spear and Go Lian collided in midair, one from top to bottom and the other from bottom to top. Bang! The void distorted and the entire Eternal Kingdom was torn apart horizontally. Lu Yin held Go Lian tightly and countless inner world lines merged into it. At the same time, the visualization of the fifth mainland appeared behind him, and his power kept increasing. Above him, Di Qiong's eyes were ferocious. Is the power of the Grim Reaper enough? So what if the Grim Reaper is here? Go Lian cracked open and the spear pierced through it. It pierced through the Grim Reaper's left arm and into Lu Yin's palm. Blood flowed out of Lu Yin's palm. Behind him, Big Sis and the rest were all pushed back by Di Qiong's sequence laws. No one could help Lu Yin. Blood flowed down his arm and gradually turned golden. Lu Yin used the victorious fight technique and his arm withered at the same time. Great power flowed down the spear and Lu Yin's arm kept recovering. It withered and recovered again, and this process repeated several times. Lu Yin released the power of the victorious fight technique and Go Lian pushed the spear back for the first time. Due to the influence of the death aura, the people of the Two-Blade Sect, Heavy Ghost and Thousand Faces game all looked up with shocked expressions. The majestic deathly aura was corroding their bodies and they knew how powerful it was. How could that person suppress the deathly aura? They did not know Di Qiong, but Di Qiong recognized them. Di Qiong did not know Two-Blade Sect and the rest, but he could recognize the divine power in their bodies. Since they had divine power, they must be Eternals. It turned out that this was the place where the Eternals were imprisoned. With the power of the Grim Reaper, it was no wonder that he could suppress progenitors. Go Lian cracked open continuously and Lu Yin gritted his teeth. In the end, he could not withstand Di Qiong's spear. As the spear fell, Lu Yin borrowed the force to crash into the ground to avoid being stabbed. Di Qiong quickly chased after him, but he did not realize that there was a flash of light around him. In that 1 second he could not catch up with Lu Yin and Lu Yin crashed into the ground, overturning the earth. Di Qiong was about to continue attacking when he suddenly turned around. His expression changed and he threw the spear away. At the same time he grabbed the ground with one hand trying to capture Lu Yin and Two Blades sect. Where did this bastard come from? How dare he touch my little seven? His furious voice shook the Eternal Kingdom. Lu Yuan suddenly appeared and faced Di Qiong. He slapped the spear along the way and Di Qiong's face turned gloomy. Lu Yuan? Facing Lu Yuan's slap, Di Qiong clenched his fist and punched out. The pupilless transformation increased his physical strength to a terrifying degree, and he suppressed Lu Yin and the rest until they could not breathe. However, his fist was bent by Lu Yuan's slap and his wrist was broken. Lu Yuan was surprised. You can withstand my slap? Di Qiong was shocked. How could he not be able to defeat Lu Yuan? He thought that even the Grim Reaper might not be able to defeat him. How powerful was Lu Yuan? Chapter 3058. Lu Yuan slapped Di Fui again. It was a simple slap. This time Di Qiong used his divine power. Underground, Lu Yin spat out a mouthful of blood. He looked up and saw a dark red divine power covering the sky. Just as he was about to leave, the divine power covered the ground. Lu Yuan, now is not the time. I will fight you sooner or later. Little brat, don't run. Lu Yuan shouted angrily. The next moment, Lu Yin saw darkness in front of him. Oh no, was he taken away? He was doomed. Even the patriarch could not save him. Once Di Qiong took him away, he would definitely die. Under the protection of the divine power, no power could break through, including reverse steps. He thought quickly and suddenly slapped the back of his right. The person from the Game of Thousand Faces was killed by Lu Yin's palm on his head. Lu Yin took out the dreamy illusion bubble and changed his appearance. Although he was unwilling, it seemed like he had to rely on Yi Bo to survive. The next moment, light returned to his eyes. Lu Yin fell to the ground and coughed a few times. He looked up and saw the familiar dark red ground. This was the zone of disaster, but he did not know which zone of disaster it was. Next to him was Heavy Ghost, who was screaming. Further away, Two Blades fell to the ground, along with the corpses of the people from the Game of Thousand Faces. Where's Lu Yin? Di Qiong looked down at them and was puzzled. He stared at Lu Yin and the rest. Lu Yin covered his chest and looked up. Where is this? Zone of disaster. This is the zone of disaster. Brother, we're back. This is the zone of disaster. Wow, the zone of disaster, the return of love. This is the return of love. I am back. Di Qiong frowned and looked at them. It was not Lu Yin. Did he run away? He thought about how he had been reversed by 1 second. It was possible that he had run away. However, he stared at them and asked, Who are you? Among Two Blades, the man with short blue hair stood up and replied respectfully, Greetings, Master. I am Two Blades, Captain of the True God Guards. Heavy Ghost also stood up quickly. Greetings, Master. I am Heavy Ghost, Captain of the True God Guards. Lu Yin bowed respectfully. Greetings, Master. I am Yi Bo, Captain of the True God Guards. Di Qiong stared at them. True God Guards? There is one in the zone of disaster. Do you know the Middle Plate? Middle Plate? He is also one of the captains of the True God Guards. Did he come from here? Di Qiong stared at Heavy Ghost and said, I can feel the divine energy in your body. I am sure that you are from the Eternal Tribe. He looked at Dual Blade Flow and Lu Yin and asked, What about you? Two Blade Stream said respectfully, Sir, our divine power has been exhausted, but Heavy Ghost can testify for me. I am the captain of the True God Guard. Heavy Ghost shouted, Sir, Two Blade School is the captain. We are friends. The pink-haired girl mumbled. She despised the Heavy Ghost. This fellow loved all day long. It was disgusting. Di Qiong looked at Lu Yin. Lu Yin replied, This subordinate's divine power has also been depleted, but Dual Blade Stream can testify for this subordinate. Furthermore, if my lord does not believe me, this subordinate can absorb the divine power for you to see. Di Qiong was disappointed. Were they really the captains of the True God Guards? Unfortunately, he had hoped that Lu Yin was among them. Lu Yin's methods were strange, and it was not impossible for him to disguise himself and hide from the first zone of disaster. As long as he could capture Lu Yin, the first zone of disaster would lose face. What a pity. After a moment of silence, Di Qiong said, This is the third zone of disaster. Wait here. After a while I will bring you to the first zone of disaster. You can also return by yourself through the Stargate. The blue-haired man looked at Lu Yin. Yi Bo, do you have a Stargate? Lu Yin shook his head. No. We don't have one either. The third zone of disaster? We have not seen the other zones. Thank you for bringing us back, but we do not have a stargate, so we cannot return. Di Qiong looked at the corpse of the Thousand Faces checker. Is he also a captain of the True God Guard? How did the checker die? Heavy Ghost asked. The pink-haired girl said, it should be that Lu Yin fell and smashed him to death. Or he killed him before he escaped, the blue-haired man said. Yibo was silent. Di Qiong frowned. Did not matter if he was dead. The captain of the first zone of disaster was also a valuable person. After all, he could cultivate divine power. Soon Di Qiong left. It would take some time before he could send them to the first zone of disaster. After Di Qiong left, the pink-haired girl heaved a sigh of relief. That's terrifying. He must be at the level of the 7 sky gods. The blue-haired man said solemnly, 3 pillars and 6 boundless, extremely powerful. Heavy Ghost screamed, I'm back. I'm back. My babies, I'm back. Ah. The pink-haired girl looked at him with disdain. Disgusting. Then she looked at Lu Yin. Yibo, why are you still so cold? Are you not happy to be back? Lu Yin did not know how to feel. Happy. Muji knew that he was pretending to be Yibo. Once he returned to the first zone of disaster and bumped into Muji, it would be troublesome. He should have gone back, but this was the third zone of disaster. Wu Tian should be here and he should have no problem staying here as Yibo. Perhaps he could find out the truth about Wu Tian. Was he happy or not? He could not tell, so he could only treat it coldly. For the time being, he should stay here and investigate Wu Tian. If Wu Tian was trapped here, he could take him with him. Thinking of this, Lu Yin looked into the distance. He would never go to the first zone of disaster. It was too dangerous. At the same time, in the Eternal Kingdom, Patriarch Lu Yuan and the rest could not find Lu Yin. They guessed that Di Qiong had taken him away. The headmaster should be fine. He can disguise himself as Yi Bo, Elder Chan said. Big Sister also said, nothing will happen to that kid. He's more cunning than anyone else. Patriarch Lu Yuan frowned. He hoped that nothing would happen. Little Seven must come back. No matter how worried everyone was, he still had to do what he had to do. The goddess mourned. The 3 sacred beasts were all dead. Before Di Qiong left, he used his divine power to kill them. This was his original goal and he had achieved it. This was the Eternal Tribe's method. Under many circumstances they could achieve their goals. The god of Forgotten Ruins left the 5th mainland. The limitless empire was frightened by the god of Forgotten Ruins. Without Lu Yin, the Above Heaven sect lost its direction. In the blink of an eye, Lu Yin and the other True God Guard captains had been in the third zone of disaster for half a month. During this time, Di Qiong did not appear and no one came to look for them. It was as if they had been forgotten. Lu Yin was happy, but waiting was not a solution. Once Di Qiong appeared, he would take them to the first zone of disaster. He could not directly tell Di Qiong that he wanted to stay in the third zone of disaster. He had to think of a way to stay. In this half a month, Lu Yin and the rest saw many corpse kings. There was no difference in the first zone of disaster. However, the difference was that the corpse kings here had all cultivated the corpse king transformation. Legend has it that Di Qiong is the creator of the corpse king transformation. Therefore, the corpse kings in the third zone of disaster are all cultivating the corpse king transformation. Those who do not can't stay in the third zone of disaster. The blue-haired man lamented as he looked at the corpse kings who were trying to cultivate the corpse king transformation. Zhonggui screamed, how did you know? We are forbidden to talk about the other zones of disaster in the first zone of disaster. This is a betrayal of love. The pink-haired lady made a face. The ancestor said so. We were brought here by the ancestor. She told us many things and asked you to mind. Lu Yin's heart skipped a beat. You were brought here by the ancestor? The pink-haired lady's eyes lit up. Yi Bo, are you interested in talking? Lu Yin looked cold and did not answer. The pink-haired lady rolled her eyes. If you don't want to talk, then don't talk. It's rare. Lu Yin looked at the black mother tree in the distance. Although only a few days had passed, he was still nervous. Di Qiong had told the ancestor about his appearance, and the ancestor had told Mu Ji and the rest about it. He could not guarantee that Mu Ji would not reveal his suspicions. This was very dangerous. Regardless of whether the ancestor believed it or not, she would definitely verify it, and Lu Yin could not afford to do so. He had stayed in the third zone of disaster to investigate Wu Tian's situation, but he could not just run around everywhere. After waiting for a few days, he felt that it was time. With that thought, he headed in a certain direction. Over the past few days, he had seen all the corpse kings heading in that direction. Yibo, where are you going? The pink-haired lady asked. Lu Yin did not even turn around. I'm going to take a look. I want to go too. The pink-haired lady was impatient. The blue-haired man hesitated. Brother, let's go take a look. Look, even Yibo is going, the pink-haired lady pleaded. Zhonggui screamed from the side. Let's go together. This is a patrol of love. Get lost. The pink-haired lady was disgusted. The blue-haired man said, Lord Diqiong might have forgotten about us. You wouldn't go to the first zone of disaster just for us. Let's take a look at this zone of disaster first. I'm curious too. Lu Yin did not wait for them and headed straight into the distance. He had his own goals, so how could he wait for these people? It was best to split up. But even if he wanted to split up, two blades stream and the others did not want to, so they followed closely behind him. Towers stood tall on the ground, and they were more densely distributed than the fourth zone of disaster. The third zone of disaster's strength surpassed the fourth, but it was still far from the first zone. They were now facing away from the Black Mother Tree, which was equivalent to walking towards the periphery of the third zone of disaster. The further they went, the more corpse kings they saw. There were also human cultivators among them. Some were trying to cultivate corpse king transformations, while others were trying to cultivate divine power. Although there were no true god guards in the third zone of disaster, as long as one cultivated divine power, they would be different from the other powerhouses. There were different levels here, and divine power was different in every zone of disaster. Bang! The sound of a collision came from afar. Lu Yin looked over and saw two figures using corpse king transformations at the same time. They were both humans. Could humans cultivate corpse king transformations? Of course they could. The first person Lu Yin saw was Zirong, but Zirong's cultivation was far from mature. On the other hand, the two humans here did not seem to be unfamiliar with corpse king transformations. They had already reached the level of Green Eyes transformation, and their attacks were different from corpse kings. They had the flexibility of humans in battle, but they were also fearless. Chapter 3059. Lu Yin was well aware of how the corpse king transformation was cultivated. Back when the Undying God had been trapped by the ancestral Meng, Lu Yin had almost killed him with his slippers. It had only been the sole true God who had stepped in to save the Undying God. Before that, the Undying God had spread the corpse king transformation technique throughout the entire cosmic tree realm, which had caused a huge commotion. Fortunately, it had been suppressed. The corpse king transformation was no secret to Lu Yin. However, he had never thought of cultivating it. If he did, the consequences would be unpredictable. The technique's ultimate goal was to turn a person into a monster that was neither human nor corpse. If we were to compare the power of the corpse kings, this third region of calamity should be the strongest out of all the regions in our clan. After all, they have all cultivated the corpse king transformation. In our region of calamity, only some of the corpse kings are qualified to cultivate it, the blue-haired man said. The pink-haired girl didn't care. So what if they're strong? Without enough powerhouses, these corpse kings are nothing but ants. You're right. This is the reprimand of love. Two blades, well said. The heavy ghost swayed as he spoke, making people feel uncomfortable. Lu Yin sped up. The zone of calamity was vast, and he didn't know how long it would take him to reach the end. On the third day after he sped up, there were already a lot of corpse kings around him. They were densely packed together, and they were all heading in one direction. Through the occasional conversation between the human traders, Lu Yin knew that they were heading to the Corpse King tablet. It was a place that Diqiong had built for the third zone of calamity. Anyone who set foot in the third zone could head to the Corpse King stele to cultivate the Corpse King transformation. Two blades claimed that the Corpse King transformation had been created by Diqiong, but Lu Yin didn't know if that was true. At least based on the current situation, it was possible that Diqiong had created it. Not long after, Lu Yin saw a huge stone stele. It was simple and ancient, surrounded by corpse kings. They seemed to be densely packed, but their distribution was very orderly. The stronger the corpse king, the closer they were to the center, and the fewer corpse kings there were. The further one went, the more densely packed there were. The corpse kings of the eternal race all had different shapes. Although they were all transformed from humans, some had grown up in different environments and had undergone changes. Among the countless corpse kings surrounding the corpse king stele, there were giants that were 1,000 meters tall and some that were less than a meter tall. They were all humans. Lu Yin could forget everything here at a glance, but he was disappointed that there was nothing related to Wu Tian. He had assumed that the corpse king stele had something to do with Wu Tian, but his celestial eye hadn't reacted. Then where was Wu Tianhui? Was he really in the third disaster region? They're all corpse king transformations. It's useless. This is the bewitchment of love. It's useless. The heavy ghost cried out. His words attracted the attention of many, but the zombie king didn't care. Their way of thinking was fixed. However, there were many traitors among them, or rather people born in the eternal kingdom. The words of the heavy ghost made them unhappy. The pink-haired woman frowned. Hey, shut up. The heavy ghost shouted. Is it wrong? A group of people walked over and surrounded the heavy ghost. The heavy ghost exclaimed, What are you doing? What do you want? You aren't from our third calamity region? Someone spoke up with an unkind expression. The heavy ghost was dancing with joy. Oh, no wonder. Which calamity region are you from? The heavy ghost leaned over and whispered into his ear. What did you say? Love loud. The incomer's gaze turned cold. Which calamity zone are you from? The heavy ghost waved his arms and legs and screamed. What did you say? The loudness of love? The incomer suddenly attacked and slapped the heavy ghost. The heavy ghost didn't move, and the incomer's palm landed on the heavy ghost's shoulder. However, the incomer's body was repelled by an even greater force, and the heavy ghost's arm was broken. The surrounding people attacked at the same time. The surrounding corpse kings only moved aside slightly, but they didn't attack. Corpse kings rarely had other emotions. The heavy ghost still didn't move. The group's attacks all landed on his body, but they couldn't even make him move. They were all repelled and a few of them were even killed. No matter what, he was still the captain of a true god's guard. Of the people surrounding him, only the first to speak was a half-ancestor. The rest weren't even half-ancestors. It's useless. It's useless. The corpse king transformations are useless. The heavy ghost laughed. The pink-haired woman was disgusted. This guy has a cheap mouth. He'll be unlucky one day. The blue-haired man said in a low voice. You can't blame him. He's very special. The pink-haired woman suddenly thought of something and clicked her tongue. Lu Yin opened his heaven's eye and looked into the distance, hoping that it would help him find something related to Wu Tian. However, he found nothing. Suddenly he looked into the distance and saw a figure shooting through the air like a meteor. Its target was the heavy ghost. The heavy ghost turned around, but before he could see anything, his body was sent flying by a huge force. There was a loud bang and the ground trembled. The void distorted and spread out, causing the entire area to tremble. A 9-meter-tall giant had suddenly appeared. Its red eyes were malevolent as it stared at the heavy ghost. Its entire body seemed like it would explode at any moment. This was a giant with red eyes. Lord Xingwu. Greetings, Lord Xingwu. Greetings, Lord Xingwu. Lu Yin's gaze trembled. This fellow wasn't weak, or rather he was very strong. The feeling he gave off was similar to that of a mid-range cultivator. Two Blades was on high alert. As for the heavy ghost, it crashed into the ground and still hadn't gotten up. This giant named Xingwu stared at the heavy ghost with red eyes. Is the corpse king transformation useful? The heavy ghost coughed and slowly stood up. Heavy blow of love. This is the heavy blow of love. The giant Xingwu's eyes widened. It took a step forward and punched the heavy ghost again. A pitch-black mace suddenly appeared in the heavy ghost's hand. Lu Yin didn't know where it had been hiding. Seeing Xingwu's punch coming, the mace expanded and swept out. Bang! The ground trembled. A huge force blasted into the clouds and cracked the sky, attracting everyone's attention. Xingwu took a step back and the heavy ghost took a step back at the same time. Lu Yin narrowed his eyes. This Xingwu's physical strength wasn't below that of a mid-range cultivator. Two Blades was amazed. Among the captains of the true god guards, there weren't many who could compete with the heavy ghost in terms of strength. As expected of a monster that cultivated the Corpse King transformation, Xingwu was surprised. No wonder you looked down on the Corpse King transformation. It turns out that it has this kind of strength. Alright, I'll make you convinced. As soon as it finished speaking, its pupils changed from red eyes to ghost eyes. Its terrifying strength surged crazily and burned the void. The heavy ghost screamed, "Stop. You can stop the fight of love." Xinwu turned around and rushed to the heavy ghost at an extremely fast speed. It sent the heavy ghost flying with a slap. The heavy ghost smashed into the divine power river in the distance. "It's over. Those who don't cultivate divine power will die if they fall in," someone commented. "Serves him right. Who asked him to mock the Corpse King transformation? This is the strength of our third zone. The chosen of God's battle is near." Lord Xinwu also wants to show off in front of Lord Di Qiong. Xinwu took a deep breath and her pupils returned to normal. No matter which zone he was from, mocking the Corpse King transformation in the third zone was courting death. There were 6 eternal zones. Other than the first zone, the other 5 zones would occasionally interact with each other. The Corpse Kings wouldn't compete with each other, but the eternal race didn't only have Corpse Kings. Behind Xinwu the void distorted and another figure appeared. "This guy's mouth is too cheap. It's good that you taught him a lesson." Xinwu was puzzled. "Taught him a lesson? He can still survive." "Of course. He's the same as me. He's a captain of the true God Guards." The newcomer smiled and looked not far away. "Right, Brother Yebwa." Lu Yin stared at the newcomer. "Muji." Two Blades was also surprised. "Muji, why are you in the third zone?" the pink-haired girl exclaimed. Muji smiled brightly. "The first zone went through a huge battle. Those who were injured were sent to the other zones to rest. After all, no one knows if that lunatic Lu Yin will attack the first zone again." When he said this, he glanced at Lu Yin with a smile in his eyes. Lu Yin looked at him. "The zone of calamity was attacked? Brother Yebwa, can I have a word with you?" Muji smiled. The pink-haired girl warned, "Yebwa, be careful. This guy is very cunning." At this moment, a heavy ghost climbed out of the divine power river. "My love is injured." Xinwu stared at the heavy ghost. No wonder he could withstand her attack. The captain of the first zone's true God Guards? He went to the first zone in the middle game. With Muji's arrival, the heavy ghost was knocked out of the divine power river. The farce finally ended. Although it was a farce, it didn't affect the Corpse Kings at all. Only the people around them were affected. Lu Yin and Muji distanced themselves from the crowd. "Should I call you Brother Yebwa or that person?" Muji smiled at Lu Yin. Lu Yin was calm. "That person? Brother Yebwa, are you still playing dumb with me?" Muji stared into Lu Yin's eyes. Lu Yin's tone was cold. "That person, who is it?" Muji stared at Lu Yin. Lu Yin looked back at him without flinching. After a while Muji sighed. "Right, I'm not sure. Normally, with that person's identity, he shouldn't take the risk to come to the zone of calamity. No one would believe him. What's more, Brother Yebwa cultivated divine power. What a joke. Once the news of that person cultivating divine power spreads out, do you think his side will accept it? If this place wasn't the zone of calamity, Lu Yin would use all means to kill Muji. He could tell old ancestor Tianyi and the others that he cultivated divine power without hesitation. But this matter could not be spread in the Six Directions Society. Muji sized up Lu Yin. "Actually, I'm rarely wrong when I see evil. Other than identifying a person through evil, I can also see through evil. You don't have much evil. This doesn't match your identity as the captain of the true God Guards." Lu Yin asked coldly, "Are you done?" Muji felt a headache coming. "It's hard to communicate with you. All right, whether you're that person or not, it has nothing to do with me. I only have one goal." He raised a finger and pointed it in front of Lu Yin's eyes. "The true God's ultimate skill." Lu Yin raised his eyebrows. "Another true God's ultimate skill. I want to obtain the true God's ultimate skill. Let's cooperate. Even if you're that person, it won't affect me. I won't give you the chance to silence me. With that person's ability, he might be able to help me obtain the true God's ultimate skill. He's famous for turning the impossible into possible." Lu Yin shook his head. "Not interested." Chapter 3060. Muji continued, "We're working together. There are 3 true God ultimate techniques hidden under the river. If you help me, it's the same as me helping you. Don't you want them? Haven't you heard of the legend? You've cultivated divine power, so the true God's ultimate techniques will be much more helpful to you than to me." Lu Yin pretended not to hear the last part of Muji's words. Instead, he was more interested in the legend. Someone in the 7 celestial skies obtained a true god's ultimate technique? Muji shook his head. No. According to the legend, the only true god has 3 ultimate techniques. Cultivating any one of them will allow one to transcend and become the strongest since ancient times. Lu Yin coldly replied, not interested. You don't believe me? If the true gods were the strongest since ancient times, the 6 Direction Association would have ceased to exist a long time ago. It's not only the true gods that can transcend. You know that humans are the best at creation and they also have methods to transcend. Right now it's a competition of who's faster. I want to participate as well. My innate gift is destined to be extraordinary, and I was revived by the ancestor's sword. That sword, Tsk, was ruthless enough. Lu Yin looked at Muji. Not interested. Muji was speechless. Do you have anything else to say other than that? Lu Yin turned to leave. He had already decided to return to the above heaven. Whether or not Muji confirmed his identity, he could not take the risk. Who, have you heard of this name? Lu Yin suddenly stopped, his eyes flashing. Wang Ho is also problematic. She's not evil. How interesting. A captain of a true god's guard, one of the greatest traders in the history of the 5th mainland, is actually not evil. Brother Yebwa, don't you find it ironic? Lu Yin looked back at Muji. This has nothing to do with me. Muji's lips curled up. I'm afraid of offending people. Why don't you tell the ancestor about this? Lu Yin stared at Muji and the smile in Muji's eyes grew wider. It has nothing to do with me, Lu Yin replied. Muji was speechless. What's the point of jumping around with 4 words? Who's Wu? Wu Ho's name. Is there a problem? No problem. Pausing for a moment, he slapped his head. That's right, I almost forgot. After the 6th Direction Association attacked the Calamity region, Wu Ho went out once. Others don't know, but I do. Not long after, the corpse god almost died. The corpse god is a member of the 7 sky gods. He was almost killed by the 6 Direction Society, but he also caused a commotion in the 1st zone of Calamity. Because of this, the ancestor of the ancients contacted the other zones of Calamity, and those of us who were injured were also thrown out of the 1st zone of Calamity to prevent any misfortune. Brother Yibo, don't you think there's a connection? It has nothing to do with me. Muji chuckled and moved closer to Lu Yin, whispering something into his ear before leaving. Lu Yin remained where he was, dumbfounded. Muji had just scolded the one true god right beside his ear, and her words had been rather sharp. He looked at Muji's back. Muji's back was facing him and he waved his hand. The observation platform. Scolding the one true god didn't mean that Muji wouldn't expose Lu Yin, nor did it give Lu Yin any leverage. After all, Lu Yin had no proof that Muji had scolded the one true god. The biggest implication of this action was that Muji didn't belong to the Eternals. No one who cultivated divine power would dare to scold the one true god. It was just like how an ordinary person would never scold the god they believed in, even if they believed that the god didn't exist. Muji was one such example. He had scolded the one true god and his words had been sharp and vicious. Lu Yin felt like his worldview had been refreshed. This guy was ruthless. What was wrong with this Muji? He had betrayed Mu Spacetime. Senior Woodcarving had said that this was true. After joining the Eternals, he had tried to use evil to control the Central Plate. In the end, he had been thrown into the Divine Power Lake, but he had come out unscathed. It wasn't likely that he was a spy planted by the humans in the Eternals. It was too obvious. The ancestor of the ancients wasn't stupid. How much had Huewu sacrificed to infiltrate the Eternals? Muji definitely couldn't compare to him, but if he had really betrayed the humans and joined the Eternals, then he had constantly courted death and even dared to scold the one true god. He hadn't told the ancestor of the ancients about Huewu. Once he did, Huewu would be finished. Also, he hadn't said anything about Wang Xiaoyu and his own speculations. What was this guy trying to do? Was he really trying to get the true god's ultimate skill? Lu Yin was confused. Dual Blade walked over. Yibo, are you stupid? Muji must have said something to you. Be careful of him, he's a villain. Lu Yin agreed. He is indeed a villain. What did he say? The pink-haired girl was curious. Lu Yin said, he mocked us for being caught. Bastard. At this moment, Lu Yin heaved a sigh of relief. If Muji wanted to harm him, he could have done so now. He would have told Di Qiong that Lu Yin had been captured by Di Qiong before he showed himself. Muji did not do so. Although Lu Yin could not see through Muji's intentions, at least he would not be so nervous that he would be exposed. There must be a reason why he didn't expose him now. What Lu Yin needed to do now was to understand Wu Tian's situation as soon as possible. The last 3 words he left were, "Observation platform?" What did that mean? The little giant Xingwu also left. He seemed to have only come to teach the heavy ghosts a lesson and wasn't interested in Dual Blade or Lu Yin. A few days passed. Lu Yin shook off Dual Blade and the heavy ghosts and headed into the distance alone. He already knew where the observation platform was. There were 81 eternal kingdoms in the 3rd zone of disaster. They were arranged in a circle. Outside the eternal kingdoms, the Corpse King tablet was in the direction of the Black Mother Tree. The Corpse King tablet went straight to the eternal kingdoms and reached the center of the 81 eternal kingdoms. That was where the observation platform was. Lu Yin walked past one eternal kingdom after another, and the further he went, the weaker the Corpse Kings became. He saw several eternal kingdoms that were completely different from the 5th mainland's eternal kingdom. No one had been slaughtered by the Corpse Kings here, and it seemed as if the 2 races were truly living together. To be honest, Lu Yin didn't believe that humans and Corpse Kings could coexist. He carefully observed every eternal kingdom that he passed by and found that the humans and Corpse Kings did indeed coexist, but they had their own way of coexisting. Just like the eternal kingdoms that had been modified by the Sea King's dome, humans and Corpse Kings lived on opposite sides of the eternal kingdoms. Although they interacted with each other, they both had their own misgivings. This superficial harmony was maintained because the Corpse Kings no longer attacked the humans, and because the people here didn't fear them. The first batch of people who had been captured and brought to the eternal kingdoms to coexist with the Corpse Kings must have been terrified. The more terrified they were, the more the Corpse Kings would want to kill them. Now almost all of these people had been born in the eternal kingdoms, and they knew that the eternal kingdoms were their home. The Corpse Kings were also a type of human, so they naturally didn't fear them. Lu Yin's heart sank. What were the Eternals trying to do? Building the eternal kingdoms meant taking drastic measures to erase the sense of belonging that humans had to their own race. What would they gain from that? To put it bluntly, wouldn't it be better to transform these people into Corpse Kings? More square. So they could use them? What was their goal? There were too many things that Lu Yin wanted to understand, and the answers to these questions could only be obtained from the Eternals. The path ahead suddenly opened up, and Lu Yin walked to the end of one of the eternal kingdoms. Further ahead was the center of the 81 eternal kingdoms, where there was an observation platform. Muji had definitely mentioned the observation platform for a reason. Soon Lu Yin saw the platform and his pupils shrank. He stood there, his mind blank. Was that the observation platform? In the center of the 81 eternal kingdoms, there was a cylindrical platform. On the platform there were chains connected to nothingness. The chains bound a man in ragged clothes who looked extremely wretched. The man had been bound for an unknown period of time, and the chains and the platform were filled with the decay of time. Crows circled high up in the sky, letting out mournful cries. What truly stunned Lu Yin was that the chains that bound the man formed a single word: Wu Tian. This person was Wu Tian? Lu Yin's limbs went cold and he was completely stunned. This man was Wu Tian? So that's what the viewing platform was. That person was Wu Tian. That person was Wu Tian. Lu Yin approached the platform step by step, and people rushed over from time to time. There were old people, children, Corpse Kings, and all sorts of strange creatures. These people walked around the platform and they were already used to it. None of them even glanced at the platform, and everyone avoided it with disgust. The stench around the platform assailed Lu Yin's nostrils. Lu Yin couldn't see anything other than that man. Was he really Wu Tian? Laughter rang out and a child bumped into Lu Yin, fell down and cried, attracting the adults. Who are you? Don't you see the child? Don't you know how to support him? Kid, are you asking for a beating? Turn around and look at me. I'm talking to you. Answer me. Kid. Lu Yin approached the platform step by step, completely ignoring the shoving of the man behind him. Forget it, you're crazy. Scope. Wait, Lu Yin said, his back facing them. What, are you looking for a beating? Lu Yin asked. Who is this person? Can't you see him? Do you know him? Who knows him? The higher-ups said that he's a sinner who wants to destroy the peace of the eternal kingdom. Kid, who are you? Don't you know? You're not from the eternal kingdom, are you? Lu Yin's eyes flickered. Don't you know him? Human history had long disappeared in the eternal kingdom and history had been forgotten. Are they still the same as me? No one can blame them. They were born in the eternal kingdom and they knew nothing. They could only blame those who failed to protect the human race. What was the reason for people to cultivate? To transcend? To live forever? Well, the purpose of cultivation was simple: to protect history and the race. That was all. The people of the eternal kingdom avoided the viewing platform. Clearly, the viewing platform was a dirty place in their hearts. Their gazes towards the viewing platform were filled with disgust. Only Lu Yin stood below the observation platform. He wasn't worried that Di Qiong would see him, as his divine power was the best guarantee. A person who cultivated divine power would not be suspected. At least for now. Chapter 3061. Up on the observation platform, Wu Tian was chained to the bone and hung in the air like a fossil. Lu Yin stared at him and before he knew it the sky had turned completely dark. The glowing orbs above the eternal kingdom provided light, and with light there was darkness. As darkness descended, Lu Yin stepped onto the observation platform. The moment he stepped onto the platform, the celestial eye on his forehead unconsciously opened, and he looked at Wu Tian. At the same time, Wu Tian opened his eyes and looked at Lu Yin. When their eyes met, they saw the shock in each other's eyes. Lu Yin had thought that Wu Tian was dead, as he hadn't sensed any signs of life from Wu Tian's body. This had made him wonder if the undying god really wanted to kill Wu Tian. However, Wu Tian was surprised to see the celestial eye. Lu Yin stared blankly at Wu Tian. Wu Tian's cloudy eyes suddenly became clear, and Lu Yin saw his own figure appear in his pupils. However, it was only for a moment before Wu Tian closed his eyes again, his body filled with a decaying aura. It was as if he had died. Lu Yin's eyes flashed. He hadn't seen wrongly, he had seen gratification in Wu Tian's eyes. What was he gratified about? Did he recognize that Lu Yin wasn't an eternal? Lu Yin didn't have much time to think about it, as a figure walked over from another direction. It was silent, like a shadow that slowly approached. Lu Yin looked over and saw that it was a girl with long black braids. Her face was delicate, and although she wasn't as beautiful as the girl with the long red hair, she had an unyielding determination. Lu Yin could see that determination written all over her face with a single glance. She walked up to the observation platform, ignored Lu Yin and walked over to Wu Tian. Do you think you can survive this time? Wu Tian opened his eyes again but he didn't speak. He just looked at her. Her voice was cold. Let's see if you can survive. A curved sword appeared in her hand and she stabbed it at Wu Tian. Lu Yin subconsciously wanted to block it, but Wu Tian's gaze suddenly swept over him, stopping him in his tracks. Lu Yin watched as the girl stabbed her sword into Wu Tian's neck, but no blood flowed out. Wu Tian's blood seemed to have been drained long ago. The tip of the sword pierced through the back of his neck, causing the sky of the third zone to distort. Far away, Di Qiong opened his eyes and looked through the void to the observation platform. He saw the girl stabbing her sword into Wu Tian's neck, and saw Lu Yin standing beside her. He didn't mind and slowly closed his eyes. Wu Tian wouldn't die so easily. Retracting her sword, the woman gazed upwards. Wu Tian was still the same, as if he could die at any moment, but at the same time he wouldn't die. You can't even die from this. You deserve to be tortured here. I will do my best to kill you. The woman coldly spoke. She didn't receive any reply from Wu Tian. Her sword vanished as she turned and prepared to leave. Wait, Lu Yin said. The woman turned around and looked at Lu Yin. Why do you want to kill him? Lu Yin asked. The woman coldly asked, Who are you? Captain of the True God Guard Yi Bo, First Calamity Zone, Captain of the True God Guards. The woman's eyes flashed and she sized up Lu Yin. She did not say anything as she took a step forward, intending to distort the void and disappear. At the same time, Lu Yin took a step forward and arrived at the woman's side. She casually struck out with her palm, and although it seemed gentle, the wind from her palm pressed down on the void. This palm force was definitely not weaker than Silent Void's emptiness palm. Ordinary progenitors would not be able to withstand this attack. Lu Yin drew out his divine power and dodged the palm strike. He then reached out to grab the woman's arm. The woman allowed him to grab her arm and her eyes suddenly turned scarlet. Her eyes turned red. A terrifying force came from the woman's arm and flung Lu Yin away. A thin sword appeared in her hand again, and its tip curved as it pierced towards Lu Yin in an unpredictable trajectory, sealing off all of his escape routes. Lu Yin had encountered many sword experts since he started cultivating. He himself was a sword expert, and he had obtained the heavenly eye of martial law, which made it extremely easy for him to break through weapons. However, this sword gave him a different feeling. It was not a sword move but a living thing. He could not see the tip of the sword clearly and could only retreat. His arms and abdomen had been slashed by the sword, leaving bloody wounds. The woman did not use too much strength, or else her sword would have been aimed at Lu Yin's head. Lu Yin could see that, or he would not have used only his current strength. Captain of the True God Guards, that's all you amount to. The woman sheathed her sword and stood there, her gaze indifferent. Lu Yin sighed. Your sword technique is very strange. Why did you stop me? The woman stared at Lu Yin. The people of the Eternal Kingdom were all cold and Mu Ji was an exception. Is he really Wu Tian? Lu Yin asked. The woman was surprised. You know Wu Tian? I come from the sixth direction beginning space, and Wu Tian is a legend in our spacetime. The woman stared at Lu Yin. She looked at him deeply. So what? Possible I also want to kill Wu Tian. Lu Yin said. The woman retracted her gaze. Did you betray your spacetime? Lu Yin was indifferent. I have always been their enemy. Then I'll have to disappoint you. He is Wu Tian but you can't kill him. Why? Even I can't kill him with just you? Lu Yin's tone was low. Why do you want to kill him? The woman looked into the distance. Most of the people in the Eternal Kingdom want him dead but I... She paused and looked at Lu Yin again. Experiment. Lu Yin's eyes flashed. Experiment. Killing Wu Tian will allow me to reach a certain height even if he is half dead. Unfortunately I can't kill him in this state. The woman casually replied. Lu Yin didn't say anything and just looked at her. Many people in the zone of calamity are like this and he often has to endure different kinds of attacks. As expected of someone who once reached the legendary realm, he has managed to survive until now. But one day he will die at my hands. She then distorted the void and left. Lu Yin watched her step into the void and slowly said, well said. It was unknown whether or not she had heard him but her body vanished. Lu Yin turned to look at Wu Tian, but he didn't say anything and left as well. On the observation platform Wu Tian hung his head and sighed. Lu Yin's expression was cold and he soon arrived at the Corpse King tablet. He saw the experts of the third zone of calamity cultivating the Corpse King transformation, and he casually grabbed one of them and asked how to cultivate it. The person Lu Yin had grabbed was only a half-ancestor, and he didn't dare to disobey Lu Yin's orders. Not long after, Lu Yin released him and the person hastily ran away, not even daring to look back. Lu Yin stood in place and stared at the Corpse King tablet in the distance before walking forward. There was an area around the Corpse King stele, and only by entering this area could one transfer their consciousness into the Corpse King stele. Relying on the Corpse Kings within the Corpse King stele to cultivate the Corpse King transformation, this was the greatest use of the Corpse King stele. There was no need to try it with one's own body, as it would always be the countless Corpse Kings left within the Corpse King tablet. Even if one failed, it didn't matter. Not everyone. Everyone could cultivate the Corpse King transformation. Di Qiong had set up the Corpse King tablet because he wanted all the Corpse Kings and people in the third zone of calamity to cultivate the Corpse King transformation. With this method, the chances of cultivating the Corpse King transformation would be extremely high. If one failed to cultivate the Corpse King transformation, they would be kicked out of the third zone of calamity. Thus, all living beings in the third zone of calamity would come to the Corpse King tablet. There was a ranking beside the Corpse King tablet, and it was the ranking of those who had reached the Corpse King transformation. Lu Yin relied on his tyrannical strength to sweep through all the Corpse Kings and directly walked to the Corpse King tablet. If other living beings wanted to cultivate in front of the tablet, they could only wait. However, experts like Lu Yin naturally didn't need to wait. In the entire third zone of calamity, there weren't many experts who had reached the progenitor realm, and such experts had special privileges. It's you. In front, a man turned around and saw Lu Yin. Lu Yin looked at the man but he didn't recognize him. You must be from another zone of calamity. You just offended Lord Xen Wu and now you're here again? Why, do you want to cultivate the Corpse King transformation? The man was curious. Lu Yin was indifferent and didn't say a word. The man sneered, "It's not that easy to cultivate the Corpse King transformation. Without a foundation you won't be able to cultivate it even if I gave you 8 to 10 years. I joined the third zone of calamity and it took me 5 years to get started. After all, we are humans, not Corpse Kings. It's better to cultivate this technique as early as possible. With our strength, it's harder to cultivate it. If it wasn't for my high comprehension, I wouldn't have been able to cultivate it even after 15 years. Look at the others, some of them couldn't even get started in 100 years. They were directly chased to other zones of calamity by Lord Di Qiong." Lu Yin didn't care about the man. Was he a human traitor? Such a person was suitable to be appointed as a general. His gaze landed on the ranking on the side of the Corpse King tablet. This ranking represented the experts who had cultivated the Corpse King transformation in the third zone of calamity. Could also be considered as the strongest experts in the third zone of calamity. The person in first place was called Under Emperor. This name wasn't simple. The master of the third zone of calamity was named Di Qiong. Was Under Emperor just below Di Qiong? The person in second place was called Jade. There was only one word, but it somehow reminded Lu Yin of that woman. That woman had been able to injure Lu Yin, who was disguised as Yi Bo, with her sword skills. This meant that her strength had surpassed the captain of the True God Guard. Such strength was enough to be ranked here. The person in third place was the middle plate. Lu Yin's eyes flashed. So the middle plate was from the third zone of calamity. No wonder his physical strength was so strong. The Corpse King transformation was strong, but Lu Yin had destroyed it. The person in fourth place was Xian Wu, the small giant who had beaten up the heavy ghost. And the person in fifth place was... The top 10 on the Corpse King tablet were all progenitors, but this ranking only included the top 10. It was impossible to know how many progenitors there were in the third zone of calamity. Stop looking. It's extremely difficult to get into this ranking. Why don't you think about how to cultivate the Corpse King transformation? However, you're from another zone of calamity, so there's no need for you to cultivate it. The man's voice sounded a little talkative. Lu Yin looked at him and asked, "What about you? What about me? You're not in the ranking. Are you mocking me?" "No. I feel like you're mocking me." "What do you?" The man's face twitched. There are no less than 20 extreme experts in the third zone of calamity. In addition to those Corpse Kings that are extremely strong but lack intelligence, there are at least 50 of them. There are so many extreme experts, but only 10 can get into this ranking. You should know that these 10 all live in the third zone of calamity most of the time. None of them are in the same situation as us. People like us can never get into the ranking. Chapter 3062. For example, Lord Di Xia, who is ranked number 1, is a powerful Corpse King personally nurtured by Lord Di Qiong. He will represent the third zone in the Chosen of Gods. Look at Lord Fei, who is ranked number 2. He was born in the Eternal Kingdom in the third zone. He has been cultivating the Corpse King transformation since he was young. Lord Xinwu, who is ranked 3rd, was brought back by Lord Di Qiong many years ago. And Lu Yin closed his eyes and ignored the man. He already knew what he needed to know. There were no less than 20 progenitors. There were also dozens of ancestral realm Corpse Kings. This was the strength of the third calamity region. To be honest, it was far from being comparable to the first zone of calamity. However, if the 7 sky gods were not included, the third zone of calamity's strength was not weak. Especially the first ranked under the Emperor, who had the qualifications to represent the third zone of calamity in the Chosen of Gods battle. That meant that he was definitely an expert of the sequence laws. What about Jade? Unfortunately, there was no way to force out her true strength on the observation platform. Wu Tian's misfortune had made Lu Yin decide to stay in the third region of calamity. Mu Ji's side was temporarily fine, and Lu Yin wanted to use Wu Tian, but Lu Yin was also using Mu Ji. Both of them wanted to achieve their own goals. Compared to helping him obtain a true god battle technique, Lu Yin would rather take Wu Tian with him. This was also why he had chosen to cultivate the Corpse King transformation. He wanted to stay. He calmed his heart and closed his eyes. When he opened his eyes, he was surrounded by darkness. This was the world inside the Corpse King tablet, and the body he had was a Corpse King. Consciousness was the power of consciousness. How could Di Qiong have the power of consciousness? The power of consciousness was not easy to deal with. The people in the game of 1,000 Faces had reached the level of the captain of the true God Guards with the power of consciousness. If Di Qiong also had the power of consciousness, Lu Yin would have to think about how to deal with it. Using this Corpse King's body to cultivate the Corpse King transformation was a passable experiment. Lu Yin already knew of the Corpse King transformation technique, and now he was finally going to try it out. This technique had always been very attractive to him. First Calamity Region. A starry door opened and a figure walked out. It was Xianwu. Xinwu landed in the First Calamity Region. She looked around and saw the cracks on the ground. Was this the result of the fierce battle with the Six Direction Society? He looked at the sky. More than half of the originally densely packed starry doors had disappeared. The first domain of disaster had truly weakened. It had actually been attacked multiple times. Did Di Qiong send you here? The ancestor of the past asked. Xianwu was startled. He didn't know how the ancestor had appeared. Yes, you have 3 captains of the true God Guards in the Third Calamity Region. Lord Di Qiong asked me to come and ask how we should deal with them, Xianwu replied, looking at the ancestor of the past with fear. Before they set off, Lord Di Qiong had warned them not to offend this woman. She was not an ordinary woman. Lu Yin and the rest were right, as Di Qiong had only just remembered to send someone to the first zone of disaster to ask about the situation. He had not taken them seriously at all. If he had not seen Lu Yin at the observation platform, he did not know how long it would have taken for him to send Xinwu to the First Calamity Zone. Why didn't he come himself? Ancestor Shi's tone was calm as he looked at the Divine Energy Lake. Xianwu replied, Master has just gone through a battle and is currently in seclusion. Tell me about it. Xinwu did not hide anything and told him everything she knew. However, he did not know that Di Qiong had encountered the primordial space in Lu Yuan. He only knew that Di Qiong had destroyed the God Kingdom and brought the 3 captains of the true God Guards from Zone 1 to Zone 3. Xianwu didn't know, but Ancestor Shi knew. Because of Night More, the 3 of them must be in the origin space. Since Di Qiong was able to bring them back, he must have gone to the origin space. Seems like he did not get any benefits. Ancestor Shi muttered. He then looked at Xinwu, bring them over. After all, they are from Zone 1. It is not good for them to stay in Zone 3. Understood. Xinwu replied. He then hesitated for a moment. Ancestor Shi looked at him. Is there anything else? Xinwu thought for a moment and looked at Ancestor Shi. May I ask, does Zone 1 wish to participate in the Chosen God battle? Ancestor Shi replied calmly, of course. Then do you have anyone in mind? Xinwu asked again. Ancestor Shi sized Xinwu up. Speak your mind. Xinwu gritted his teeth. If Zone 1 does not have any suitable candidates, I wish to represent Zone 1. In the third zone, it was obvious that the participants of the Chosen of God's battle were Emperor and Jade. He was not their match at all. Now that he saw the first zone's miserable state, he naturally thought that the first zone had weakened. He had an idea. Perhaps he could join the first zone and represent it in the battle. Ancestor Shi found it funny and did not reply. From afar, Shaoyin Divinity walked over. Why are you not representing Zone 3? Xinwu did not notice Shaoyin Divinity's appearance and was slightly afraid. It is because you do not have the qualifications to represent Zone 3. If you were to represent Zone 1, wouldn't we be eliminated before the battle even started? What do you take Zone 1 for? Shaoyin Divinity was arrogant and was getting closer to Xinwu. Xinwu's face darkened. It is not that I am weaker than them. It is just that Lord Di Qiong is biased. Shaoyin Divinity was disdainful. Get lost. You are not qualified to represent Zone 1. Xinwu was furious. What did you say? Shaoyin Divinity sized Xinwu up. He waved his hand and the fusion of Tai Yin and Tai Yang exploded. Xinwu was sent flying. Xinwu also used Corpse King transformation in an instant. However, he could not withstand the attack. The terrifying Tai Yang Divinity corroded his body and the Tai Yang Divinity burned his internal organs. He could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. Shaoyin Divinity did not even look at Xinwu. Get lost. Xinwu took a deep look at Shaoyin Divinity and left. After Xinwu left, Shaoyin Divinity looked at Ancestor Shi with a much more respectful expression. In the past, it was because of Ancestor Shi's unfathomable strength. Only after the Battle of Zone 1 did he know that Ancestor Shi had changed the cultivation direction of the Lu family. It was called Qing Luo Sword Heaven and ended the war with one sword. Ancestor Shi's strength was stronger than his. Now that he was facing Ancestor Shi, he did not dare to be impudent. What is it? Ancestor Shi's tone was calm. Shaoyin Divinity said, I wish to participate in the battle of deities. Ancestor Shi was not surprised. You are already one of the 7 heavenly gods. The 3 heavenly gods and the 6 heavenly gods have the same status. Shaoyin Divinity's eyes flashed. The 7 heavenly gods was just the name of the 6 direction sect. The 3 heavenly gods and the 6 heavenly gods were recognized by the only true God. They were second only to the only true God and were famous in the 6 regions of calamity. They were like the 3 realms and 6 Tao of Heaven sect. In the reincarnation spacetime he was one of the 3 divinities and thought that he was comparable to the 3 realms and 6 Tao. However, he later found out that he was thinking too much. Lu Yuan of the 3 realms and 6 Tao could challenge the Grand Heavenly Masters. The 3 divinities and 9 sages could not be compared to the 3 realms and 6 Tao. Only the 3 heavenly gods and 6 Tao, who were regarded as the highest level of existence by the eternal race, could compete with the 3 realms and 6 Tao. He desired to become one of the 3 heavenly gods and 6 Tao. Senior, please grant me my wish. Shaoyin Divinity bowed deeply. Ancestor Shi looked at him. No one in the 7 heavenly gods has bowed to me. Shaoyin Divinity took a deep breath. Senior, you are qualified to receive such a great bow. Ancestor Shi's expression did not change. The 6 regions of calamity of the eternal race are competing with each other. My first region of calamity has always been the strongest, but now we are being looked down upon. Shaoyin Divinity sneered. That trash dares to look down on my first region of calamity? In the battle of deities I will definitely suppress the other regions of calamity. Ancestor Shi coldly said. He is testing us. Shaoyin Divinity's expression changed. Di Qiong has many thoughts. You desire to compete with the 3 realms and 6 Tao, but the 3rd region of calamity has imprisoned Wu Tian. Ancestor Shi's voice was indifferent. Shaoyin Divinity's eyes flickered, but he could not speak for a moment. He did not think that Xin Wu was testing him, and he did not expect Wu Tian to be imprisoned in the 3rd region of calamity. Was this the strength of the 3 great leaders and 6 vast beings? Although he was arrogant, he did not think that he could surpass Wu Tian, at least not for the time being. A Void Master had almost killed him, and a Void Master was not comparable to Wu Tian. You can participate in the battle of deities. Ancestor Shi agreed. Shaoyin Divinity bowed again. Thank you, Senior. In the 3rd region of calamity, Xin Wu returned and stood respectfully in front of Di Qiong. To injure you with 1 strike, it is a good sequence rule. Di Qiong looked at Xin Wu, his tone was solemn. Shaoyin Divinity's strength was enough to make him raise his eyebrows. Xin Wu said respectfully, this person is not from the 7 heavenly gods, he will definitely represent the 1st region of calamity in the battle. Di Qiong looked up. The 1st region of calamity's strength is unfathomable, it will not be weakened so easily. It does not matter, the other experts in the regions of calamity are not weak either. This battle of deities will definitely be more intense than the previous one. Send the 3 captains of the true god guards to the 1st region of calamity. Xin Wu's command turned and left. Wait. Xin Wu quickly turned back. My lord. Di Qiong looked at him. Do you feel indignant? Xin Wu was shocked. I do not dare. Do you not dare, or do you feel indignant? I do not feel indignant. Both His Majesty and Fei have surpassed me. I definitely do not feel indignant. Xin Wu was terrified. Di Qiong's gaze was cold. You cannot be compared to them, remember this. Xin Wu quickly acknowledged and retreated nervously. The other regions of calamity were powerful, but his 3rd region of calamity was not weak either, it was just a matter of who could walk to the end. 2 of the 7 heavenly gods had died, and 1 was severely injured, who could guarantee that the 3 chiefs and 6 seas would not suffer any losses. If he could make one of his own become one of the 3 chiefs and 6 seas, he would have a greater say in the eternal tribe if he worked together. 3rd region of calamity, Corpse King Tablet. The man who was talking to Lu Yin earlier was so angry that he wanted to give Lu Yin a beating. This guy was listening to others talk and then he went to cultivate by himself. He did not even take him seriously. If it was not for the Corpse King Tablet's cultivation area, he would have attacked. When he finally managed to catch his breath, the man also began to cultivate. After Xen Wu returned to the third region of calamity, he did not immediately look for Lu Yin and the rest. He had been injured by the Shaoyin divinity and needed some time to recover. Soon half a month had passed. On this day Xen Wu walked out and began to look for Lu Yin and the rest. He easily found Dual Blade Stream and Heavy Ghost, but he could not find Lu Yin's whereabouts. He would never have dreamed that Lu Yin had gone to cultivate the Corpse King transformation. Chapter 3063. After a few days he finally found the Corpse King's stele. He saw Lu Yin standing in front of the Corpse King's stele. Yi Bo is actually cultivating the Corpse King transformation? The pink-haired girl was surprised. The blue-haired man looked into the distance, not understanding what Lu Yin was trying to do. Zhonggui screamed, "Pull him back! Pull him back!" Xinwu walked towards the Corpse King tablet. Due to being injured by the Shaoyin divinity, he was rather dissatisfied with the first zone of calamity. Ridiculous. Not far behind Lu Yin, Xinwu wanted to forcefully interfere with Lu Yin's cultivation. With his level in the third zone of calamity, he had the right to do so. Suddenly, a cry came from the side, "The rankings have changed." Xinwu looked over in surprise. The Corpse King tablet's rankings hadn't changed for many years. Even when the mid-plate had gone to the first zone of calamity, he hadn't been able to surpass the mid-plate. Why had it changed now? Everyone looked over at the rankings. The name at the bottom had been replaced by Yi Bo. Yi Bo? Who's that? Someone asked. The man talking to Lu Yin immediately looked over. Although he didn't know the name Yi Bo, it was obvious that it was this person. There weren't many extreme powerhouses who had come to the Corpse King tablet to cultivate recently, and he knew all of them except for this person. But how was this possible? How could this person climb the rankings in such a short time? Was this a joke? Xinwu looked at Lu Yin in shock. He had actually climbed the rankings? And in such a short time? He had wanted to interfere with Lu Yin's cultivation, but he couldn't do so now. Even he couldn't interfere with someone who could climb the Corpse King tablet. Otherwise, Lord Di Qiong wouldn't let him off. At that moment someone else cried out. Xinwu looked over and saw that the rankings had changed once again. Yi Bo's name was constantly moving up, surpassing one name after another, shocking the third zone of calamity. Xinwu couldn't believe it. Impossible, how could it be so fast? This person had clearly only started cultivating for a short time. The man talking to Lu Yin was even more stunned. When he thought about what he had said, his face turned red. Inside the Corpse King tablet, Lu Yin sighed. The Corpse King transformation bound the body's tissues in microscopic form, increasing the body's strength by tenfold the moment it was bound. It was a technique that could also be considered a technique. The weakness was that the tissues bound not only of the body's muscles, but also of the emotions. A person's emotions came from the various tissues within the body. His physical body was strengthened, but his emotions were also constantly erased by the bindings. This was the biggest weakness of the Zombie King transformation. To the Eternals, this wasn't a disadvantage. In fact, it was an advantage. The Eternals didn't need emotions, but Lu Yin did. He couldn't erase his emotions for the sake of cultivating the Corpse King transformation, making himself neither human nor ghost. To Lu Yin, the Corpse King transformation was very easy to cultivate. It was easy for Lu Yin to grasp the microscopic structure of the human body. After all, he had once reached the profound creation realm in terms of star energy control, and he had immediately mastered the Corpse King transformation. Furthermore, this Corpse King's body had allowed him to cultivate to the ghost pupil transformation in the shortest amount of time. If he wanted to, he could even cultivate to the eyeless transformation. However, this was only the Corpse King's body. If he could not cultivate, he would not be able to stay in the third calamity region. He had to think of a way to achieve the effect of Corpse King transformation and lure Di Qiong out so that he could stay in the third calamity region. For the rest of his time he stopped cultivating the Corpse King transformation. Instead he spent his time thinking about how to successfully cultivate his own body. In the outside world, Lu Yin's Corpse King transformation had reached Ghost Eye. The moment he changed, he instantly surpassed the 5th place and was only second to Xinwu. He was now ranked 5th on the Corpse King tablet. Xinwu was shocked. How could it be so fast? Around the Corpse King tablet, regardless of whether it was a Corpse King or any other life form, everyone was silent. Even Dual Blade Stream was stunned. Heavy Ghost was dancing with joy, but he didn't say anything. It was obvious that he was shocked as well. A few days later, Lu Yin's consciousness returned, and he decided to give it a try. When he turned around, countless gazes fell on him. A shadow loomed over him. Xinwu? Xinwu looked deeply at Lu Yin. How's the Corpse King transformation? Lu Yin nodded. It's quite powerful. I've decided to try it out. Xinwu's face twitched. Decided to try it out? This was as simple as going to the market to buy groceries. Who would dare say that the Corpse King transformation was easy to cultivate? How long had it taken him to reach the eyeless transformation? How many of the Eternals could reach the eyeless transformation? Furthermore, the Corpse King tablet wasn't meant to be used like this. Who would cultivate to the Corpse King transformation within the Corpse King tablet without actually cultivating it? It had never happened before. Everyone would first go to the Corpse King tablet to cultivate several times, tens of times, hundreds of times, thousands, tens of thousands of times. After familiarizing themselves with it, they would then go to the Corpse King tablet and come back to try again. They would repeat countless times until they succeeded. Then they would go to the Corpse King tablet to try a higher level of the Corpse King transformation. This was the correct use of the Corpse King tablet. He was the same. Fei and Dixia were the same. What was wrong with this person? The first time he entered the Corpse King tablet, he cultivated to a level second only to himself. But he himself had never cultivated it before? Xinwu looked deeply at Lu Yin. Lord Di Qiong asked me to send you back to the first zone of calamity. Lu Yin refused. I'm not going. Xinwu frowned. You don't want to go back to the first zone of calamity? I want to cultivate the Corpse King transformation. You can also cultivate in the first zone of calamity. Mu Ji's threat was temporarily removed. Lu Yin could go to the first zone of calamity, but there was no need for that. He wanted to take Wu Tian away, so he couldn't leave the third zone of calamity. There's no Corpse King tablet in the first zone of calamity. Lu Yin replied. Xinwu was unhappy. You don't need the Corpse King tablet anymore. Follow me. Lu Yin stared coldly at Xinwu. Get out of my way. Xinwu's huge body stood in front of Lu Yin. Follow me to the first zone of calamity. Don't make me repeat myself. I've said it before. Get out of my way. Lu Yin's tone was firm. Xinwu clenched his fist. You asked for it. His eyes turned red and he grabbed at Lu Yin, tearing through the void. Whether it was humans or Eternals, sometimes they were so straightforward. If Lu Yin didn't have the ability to talk to Xinwu, Xinwu wouldn't even need to ask for his permission and would just throw him to the first zone of calamity. However, Lu Yin had the ability to resist Xinwu. Xinwu was merciless. He knew the strength of the captain of the True God Guards. With his red eyes, once he caught Lu Yin, he was confident that Lu Yin wouldn't be able to escape. Lu Yin's gaze was piercingly cold. He couldn't attack that woman at the observation platform. Now he could vent his anger on Xinwu and show Di Qiong that he was qualified to stay. Yi Bo's strength in the first zone of calamity could only be considered average. However, it was different when he used his divine power. When the Thunder Lord invaded the zone of calamity, Lu Yin had disguised himself as Yi Bo and used his divine power to block the Moon Immortal, which had shocked the ancestor of the past. Now facing Xinwu, his divine power was still the best disguise. Dark red surged and covered the surface of Lu Yin's body. He similarly raised his hand to grab Xinwu. Two palms, one big and one small, collided. Xinwu subconsciously grabbed Lu Yin's arm and tried to catch him, but his eyes suddenly widened in the next moment. He hurriedly let go and took a step back. When he looked down, he saw that there was a deep imprint on his palm that was sunken in. Traces of blood flowed along the imprint. This was left behind by Lu Yin's palm. This palm had destroyed Xinwu's palm. Xinwu was furious and his pupils changed continuously. First, the ghostly eye transformation and finally, the eyeless transformation. A terrifying aura shook the surroundings and shot up into the sky. Everyone around him, including the Corpse King, retreated. Xinwu was originally a small giant, but after the eyeless transformation, the terrifying aura forcibly increased his size to that of a giant. His entire body was like an angry mountain that pressed down on Lu Yin. Terrifying, 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 Heavy Ghost cried out. Two Blade Stream looked at each other. Xinwu's strength was extremely strong even among the True God Guard captains. If they did not use their divine power, they would not be his match. Lu Yin looked up at Xinwu. When his palm pressed down, the sky collapsed and the earth cracked. This palm was the only thing left in the entire world. Xinwu's face was gloomy and his heart rumbled. His divine power surged and shot up into the sky. At the same time, the surrounding divine power river boiled. A layer of mist formed on the surface and formed a dark red color that swept towards Lu Yin. It was as though his divine power was being drawn. From afar, Diqiang looked over. This person had actually drawn out his divine power. This person actually had such talent in cultivating his divine power. Some people were born to cultivate a certain power, such as Diqiang. Diqiang thought that Diqiang was very suitable for cultivating the Corpse King transformation. Diqiang thought that Yi Bo, who was disguised as Lu Yin, had a unique talent for cultivating the divine power. Xinwu's palm covered the sky but was stopped in midair. Lu Yin's gaze was cold and a dark red color appeared in the depths of his eyes. Xinwu was flustered. Xinwu's palm was actually blocked by his divine power. This was the zone of disaster, where divine power covered the entire zone of disaster. Here Lu Yin was like the ruler. Making an enemy out of Lu Yin was making an enemy out of divine power. How could one survive in this zone of disaster? Lu Yin leaped up, clenched his fist and punched out. Bang! It shook the starry sky. Everyone felt as though they had been slapped in the face. This was the aftermath of the power that swept out in all directions. Even the progenitors were affected. Xinwu's palm was directly penetrated by Lu Yin, causing him to fall backward. Lu Yin grabbed his fingers. Get over here. Using Xinwu's fingers as a point, Lu Yin pulled him over and smashed him onto the ground. Xinwu's left hand pressed down on the ground in an attempt to support his body, but Lu Yin instantly appeared above him and kicked down. There was a loud boom as Xinwu's entire body was smashed into the ground. Dark red divine power swept out in all directions, causing the ground to split open once more as smoke and dust filled the air. The entire process wasn't long, but it was enough to shock the entire third zone of disaster. Xinwu, who was publicly recognized as second only to Fei and Diqiang in the third zone of disaster, was smashed into the ground. Furthermore, he was stepped on by someone. Lu Yin stood on Xinwu's back and the gloominess in his heart was relieved. The heavy ghost maintained its strange dancing posture and didn't move. The pink-haired girl stared blankly. Brother, this is Yi Bo? The blue-haired man was also shocked. He had never seen Lu Yin flip out like this. It was too savage to beat up a strong martial artist in the third zone of disaster. Furthermore, he was stepping on him. Around them, the corpse kings and cultivators of the third zone of disaster were silent as they stared blankly. Such a thing had never happened in the third zone of disaster. Lu Yin looked around and for a moment no one dared to look at him. Chapter 3064. At this moment, beneath his feet, Xinwu's body trembled and the ground split open again. Heavy breathing sounded in everyone's ears. Dark red divine power gushed out from Xinwu's body. He had also used his divine power. Lu Yin narrowed his eyes. Once he used his divine power, Xinwu's combat power would skyrocket. This combat power was not something that Yi Bo's identity could easily suppress. His breathing became heavier and heavier. Xinwu was suppressing something. Lu Yin looked down with a solemn gaze. Everyone could hear the heavy breathing. Xinwu's body slowly crawled out of the ground. Lu Yin lifted his leg and stomped Xinwu to the ground again. Xinwu growled and turned to look at Lu Yin on his back. His eyes were filled with crazed killing intent and resentment. Suddenly both of them looked in the same direction at the same time. They felt their hearts palpitate. Immediately after, two Blade Stream Heavy Ghost and the surrounding progenitor powerhouses all looked in the same direction. Lord Xia! Someone exclaimed. Everyone stepped aside and stood respectfully. They looked at the person in black robes walking over step by step from afar. The person's appearance could not be seen. His entire body was covered in black robes, but the aura he exuded was abnormally terrifying. Every breath he took caused the space in front of him to distort. Every step he took caused the earth to tremble. With the arrival of this person, Xinwu's boiling divine power was suppressed. The surrounding divine power river was also suppressed by an inexplicable force. In the starry sky above Lu Yin's heart, the planet formed by divine power shook. This was affected by the person who came. This person possessed terrifying strength on the path of divine power. Lu Yin was unprecedentedly serious. He had only felt this feeling from the seven sky gods. Only a powerhouse at the level of the 7 sky gods could affect him when they used their divine power. He was Dixia, the strongest powerhouse in the 3rd Calamity Zone, second only to Diqiang. He was also an extremely strong powerhouse in the 3rd Calamity Zone who would definitely participate in the Chosen Gods battle. He was definitely qualified. Dixia walked over step by step and finally stopped less than 100 meters away from Xin Wu and Lu Yin. He said in a hoarse and low voice, "Can I Xin Wu come?" This was the standard way a corpse king spoke. Dixia was a genuine corpse king. Lu Yin's gaze was solemn as he leaped down. Xinwu slowly got up. Suddenly, Dixia's body disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already on Xin Wu's back. Xin Wu did not even have time to react before his body was ruthlessly pressed into the ground. He let out a miserable howl. Everyone could only see fresh blood gushing out from the ground, causing the sky of the 3rd Calamity region to be dyed red. No one spoke. At this moment, fear and trembling emotions spread through the hearts of many people. On the Corpse King tablet, Xin Wu was ranked 4th, while under the Emperor was ranked 1st. Seemed like there was only a difference of 2 ranks, but the difference between them was like heaven and earth. Every creature in the 3rd Calamity region knew that Xin Wu didn't even dare to raise his head in front of DD. His body was still level with Lu Yin and the others who were standing on the ground, but who would have thought that he would be able to suppress an expert like Xinwu in an instant? Xinwu didn't even dare to resist. 3rd Disaster Zone. Slack. Too slow. Dixia looked at Lu Yin and spoke slowly, his voice emotionless. Lu Yin stared at Dixia in front of him. If he didn't open his celestial eye, he wouldn't be able to see this person's appearance clearly. "You're welcome. Want to stay?" "Yes. Huan. Welcome. Thank you. The Battle of Chosen Gods is about to begin. Can defeat. Jade, you can represent. Jaden. Battle of Chosen Gods." Lu Yin raised his eyebrows. Countless gazes fell on Lu Yin. Lord Diqiang actually thought so highly of this person. He wasn't from the 3rd Calamity region. The words were spoken by Dixia, but the meaning was definitely Lord Diqiang's. Only Lord Diqiang could appoint the candidates to participate in the Battle of Chosen Gods. "I can represent the 3rd Calamity region to participate in the Battle of Chosen Gods?" Lu Yin was surprised. Dixia's voice was still as low as before. "As long as you can defeat. Not stingy. You have no chance in the 1st Calamity region." Lu Yin praised, "Please thank Lord Diqiang for me." Dixia left, but before he left behind a stargate that led to the 3rd Calamity region. Lu Yin's eyes flashed. Diqiang really trusted him. It was only after His Majesty left that there was movement underground. Xinwu slowly crawled out of the ground. At this moment, his injuries were far more serious than the injuries he suffered in the 1st Calamity region. Dixia's ruthlessness was something Lu Yin had witnessed. After crawling out of the ground, Xinwu didn't say a word. He walked around Lu Yin and left with 2 Blade and Heavy Ghost. He wanted to send them to the 1st Calamity region. As for Lu Yin, he could stay in the 3rd Calamity region. After Xinwu sent 2 Blade and Heavy Ghost to the 1st Calamity region, no one cared about Lu Yin in the 3rd Calamity region. No one talked to him, and it was as if Mu Ji had disappeared. Lu Yin had his own tower and maidservants. Everything was the same as in the 1st Calamity region. The only difference was that there were no true god guards in the 3rd Calamity region, and there were no missions assigned to him. Every Calamity region was different and the way of doing things was different. There were missions in the 1st Calamity region, but there were very few missions in the 3rd Calamity region. In the blink of an eye, a month had passed. Lu Yin only went to the Corpse King tablet once. He wanted to talk to someone, but no one dared to talk to him. Even the progenitor who had spoken to him at the beginning stayed far away from him. Everyone knew that Lu Yin had offended Xinwu, and she would definitely cause trouble for anyone who got close to him. Lu Yin didn't care though, as he was waiting for Mu Ji to find him. Mu Ji wanted to work with him to find the true god's ultimate technique, so it was impossible for her to stay away forever. On this day, Lu Yin sat in his tower and opened his celestial eye to scan his surroundings. He wanted to roll his die, but he had to make sure that no one was watching him. In the 3rd Calamity region, only Diqiang and Dixia had the ability to watch him. However, the possibility of those 2 watching him was very small, as they also needed to cultivate. Furthermore, the everlasting tribe didn't seem to have the habit of watching others. After all, any human who joined the everlasting tribe was a traitor unless they were born in the eternal kingdom. Watching a group of traitors was meaningless. After looking around, Lu Yin didn't feel any fear. At his level, no matter how high someone's cultivation was, he would be able to sense it. Furthermore, he had the celestial eye, so unless it was someone at the level of the one true God, there was nothing he could do. After making sure that no one was watching him, Lu Yin raised his hand and his die appeared. He had an idea. He had cultivated divine power, so if he used divine power to roll the dice, would it be integrated into the body of a cultivator who also cultivated divine power? He had never tried it before, but now he could. He tapped the die and a useless pair of scissors fell out. It looked like a weapon, but it would break with a snap. Continue. 5 continue. 3 continue. 6 continue. His consciousness appeared in the dark space and he had successfully rolled 6 pips. Furthermore, he had rolled the die under the premise of using divine power. Since it could appear in this space, it meant that there was a ball of light that could be merged into it. He looked around and saw that there were indeed light balls. There was a particularly bright and dazzling light ball in the distance. He could not wait to rush over there. Could it be Di Qiong? Or could it be the one true God? The 6 regions of calamity were all in the same space-time. Could it enter the bodies of other experts in the regions of calamity? If this was the case, then not only would he be able to understand the Eternals, but he would also have a huge advantage when fighting against the Eternals in the future. At the very least, he would be able to know more about his enemies. Right, he could even attempt suicide, although it would definitely not be easy. His consciousness rushed towards the ball of light and merged into it. In an instant, his eyes opened and memories flooded in. Lu Yin's expression became strange. The person he had merged with was actually Xia. No wonder the ball of light was so bright. How could it be so coincidental that all 6 regions of calamity could merge into Xia's body? Lu Yin did not care about this and he hurriedly checked Xia's memories. Gradually, his expression became strange. This was really interesting. Through Xia's memories, Lu Yin understood Xia's fighting style, the rules of the sequence, and even his current location. Although he was amazed by Xia's strength, since he understood he also had a way to deal with him. No matter what, Xia could not surpass the Witch Spirit God and the Undying God. Even the 7 sky gods had been killed, and Xia was no exception. What truly piqued his interest was a plot against him. There was definitely a traitor among the true God Guard captains, and this was something that Ancestor Xi had confirmed. Back then, the 6 captains had been attacked by 6 experts from the 6-Way Association, and the answer was obvious. But even now, the Eternals had not been able to find out which one was the traitor. The most suspicious was Mu Ji, but he had used his innate gift to prove that he could escape from wood carving. This innate gift of his had caught Ancestor Xi's attention. Aside from Mu Ji, the other captains of the True God Guard all cultivated divine power. Cultivators of divine power should not betray the Eternals. If they really did betray the Eternals, then in Ancestor Xi's opinion, Yi Bo, 2 Bladers, and the other captains who had been imprisoned by the Above Heaven sect might be suspicious. It had to be said that Ancestor Xi's guess was correct, and this conspiracy against Lu Yin was likely not just targeted at him. A few days later, Xia would come to find him and tell him that they would join forces to attack the 6-Way Association. The 6-Way Association and White Cloud City had repeatedly attacked the first zone of calamity, forcing the first zone of calamity into hiding. The Eternals would not let this matter rest and they would also counterattack. The reason why Xia had told Lu Yin about this was to test whether or not he would tell the 6-Way Association so that they would be prepared. This was a huge matter. If Lu Yin had really been arranged by the 6-Way Association to infiltrate the Eternals, he would definitely have found a way to inform the 6-Way Association about this matter. Once he did, it would expose him as a traitor. The Eternals did not care about other traitors, even if the human progenitor who had surrendered to them was a spy. What they cared about was divine power. If even a cultivator of divine power could betray the Eternals, this was something that the Eternals could not accept. They had to get to the bottom of this. Whether or not Yi Bo was a traitor was not important. What was important was whether or not a true God Guard captain who cultivated divine power was a traitor. Lu Yin felt a lingering fear. Fortunately, he had rolled his die on a whim and learned of this matter. Otherwise, if he had been probed, the 6-Way Association would have been notified, and that would have been the end of him. How could they not inform the Six-Way Association? Chapter 3065. The reason why Di Qiong was in such a hurry to destroy the Divine Dwelling Nation was because he wanted to support Zone 1. This should be the support that he was referring to. It was true that they were going to attack the Six-Party Society, but the probing was just a coincidence. Coincidentally, Di Qiong had brought Yi Bo, Two-Blade Sect and the others back, so they decided to test the Six-Party Society. Regardless of whether they were testing the Six-Party Society or not, they would still attack. Their target was not the Six-Party Society, but the 5 Spirit Tribes and the 3 Moon Alliance. This was also one of the reasons why Lu Yin was afraid. Attacking the Six-Way Guild was to test him and the others, to confirm whether the true God Guard captain who cultivated divine power was reliable. Their real target was the 5 Spirit Clans and the 3 Moon Alliance. The 5 Spirit Tribes and the 3 Moons Alliance had a total of 8 Sequence Law Adepts. That was what the Eternals wanted to destroy. Di Qiong, Emperor below the Great Emperor, the first zone of disaster, and even the other zones of disaster would attack the 5 Spirit Tribes and the March Alliance. The Six Paths Association had eliminated many of the extraterritorial reinforcements of the Everlasting Race, and the Everlasting Race wanted revenge. Lu Yin withdrew from the fusion and his consciousness returned to his body. He took a deep breath. The Eternals had made a big move. This was their true goal. Once the 5 Spirit Tribes and the Tri-Moon Alliance were destroyed, White Cloud City would lose all external aid. Only White Cloud City's own strength would remain, and the sect above the heavens would also lose all external aid. The 5 Spirit Tribes were on very good terms with Lu Yin, so losing them would be a huge loss for White Cloud City. After all, they had the help of the 5 Spirit Clans when they attacked the Undying God and fought their way into the Calamity region. Most importantly, Ming Yan was still sealed in the Ice Spirit Clan's territory. Otherwise, not only would his identity as Yi Bo have been exposed, but the 5 Spirit Clans and the Tri-Moon Alliance would have been destroyed as well. The Six Direction Association would not have been able to send reinforcements so easily. He had never underestimated the Eternals, but now it seemed that, regardless of whether he had underestimated them or not, there were still some things that he could not see through. The dice had given him too much help. If he and Muji were being probed here, the Two-Blade Sect would definitely be probed as well. The Heavy Ghost would definitely not be probed. That fellow had long been locked up in the Above Heaven sect. Now that he knew about the Eternals' plan, how should he deal with it? Even if the Eternals told him that they were going to attack the 5 Spirit Tribes and the Tri-Moon Alliance, how could the Six Direction Guild stop them? He did not know how much power the Eternals would send, but he was sure that Di Qiong and Di Xia would take action. What other experts would there be in the zone of E? First, what kind of forces would the Realm of Disaster send? Without knowing the other party's deployment, the Six Direction sect would not be able to deal with it. Lu Yin's eyes twinkled. After thinking for a long time, he still couldn't think of a solution. Perhaps he should tell Wang Wen and the others and let them think of a solution. That's right, he looked at his cosmic ring. His emperor had given him a stargate, which was the beginning of his probing. He had allowed Lu Yin to freely travel to and from the 3rd region of Calamity without any worries. If he really wanted to return to Above Heaven, this was the best opportunity. He had to take advantage of the fact that Di Xia hadn't told him that they were going to attack Six Direction Guild. Otherwise, if he left the 3rd Calamity region, there would be some things that he couldn't explain clearly. Now the problem was, how was he going to leave? What reason did he have to leave? Moreover, he shouldn't have the ability to leave. One had to know that Yi Bo's identity belonged to the Starry Sky Tree. The people of the Starry Sky Tree could not locate him in the vast parallel universe because the Starry Sky Tree was split from the 5th mainland. The people of the Starry Sky Tree were in an awkward position. Once they went to another parallel universe, they could not return unless they left a seal in the Starry Sky Tree and left their aura behind. However, Yi Bo was rescued by Di Qiong from the Eternal Kingdom. What right did he have to leave the seal in the Starry Sky Tree? He shouldn't be able to go to any parallel time. It should be empty unless he casually tore through the void. That was when he had no other choice and had to flee. Lu Yin's eyes flickered. There was only one way. Lu Yin walked out of the tower and looked in the direction of the Black Mother Tree. Di Qiong was in that direction and Di Xia should be in that direction as well. Di Xia's tower was very large, much larger than Lu Yin's tower. It even surpassed the tower of the 7 sky gods in the 1st region of Calamity. However, Di Xia was not there. In the entire 3rd region of Calamity, no one outside of Di Qiong knew where Di Xia was. Xia never stayed in his tower. He always stayed underground, far away from the Corpse King's steel. Qiong and Xia were the only ones who knew. Xia could be underground, but it could also be Xia. This was what Qiong had thought when he had named Xia. Xia liked to stay underground. Lu Yin identified the Corpse King's steel's location and walked over. If he wanted to find Xia's location, he would have to pass by the Corpse King's steel. It didn't seem too out of place for him to cultivate there. Not long after, Lu Yin reached the Corpse King's steel and continued cultivating the Corpse King transformation. His surroundings were silent and no one dared to disturb him. A few days later, he intentionally or unintentionally walked towards Xia's location. It was not a strange place as there were Corpse Kings passing by. Coincidentally, he saw the human progenitor who had spoken to him for the first time in that direction. The man was stunned when he saw Lu Yin walking over and turned to leave. Lu Yin took a step forward and easily passed the man, blocking his path. "Why are you running away?" The man bitterly asked. Lord Yebwa? It's not the first time we've met." Lu Yin was indifferent. The man's face twitched. "You must have mistaken me for someone else." Lu Yin stared at the man. "You're a genius. You managed to cultivate the Corpse King transformation in 15 years. The man wanted to slap himself for talking nonsense. How can I compare to Lord Yebwa? Lord Yebwa was ranked 5th on the Corpse King's steel the first time he cultivated it." "You flatter me. You're very sincere. Let's be friends." The man was stunned. "What did you say?" Lu Yin's expression was sincere. "I'm very lonely." The man was stunned and blinked. I have something to do, so I'll take my leave." Lu Yin placed a hand on the man's shoulder. "What's your name?" The man was about to cry. "My lord, please don't play with me. I don't dare be friends with you. I'm not worthy." Lu Yin looked into the distance. "Is that your tower?" The man nodded with a sullen expression. Lu Yin's eyes lit up. "Good location." The man did not understand what Lu Yin was saying. Was this location good? "Let's go and take a look." The man was speechless. "My lord, please spare me. I can't take it." Lu Yin grabbed the man's shoulder. "I'll give you some pointers." "Can I say no?" The man wanted to retort, but the pain in his shoulder prevented him from speaking. Was this guy crazy? Who would want to be friends? And did he have friends among the Eternals? They were all traitors to the human race, so how could anyone be friends with a traitor? He had betrayed an entire civilization to join the Eternals, and he knew that he was not a good person. Wait, could this Yebwa be here for revenge? The more he thought about it, the more nervous and afraid he became. He felt like he had fallen into a bottomless abyss. Lu Yin was right. The location was really good. It was directly below the tower and it was very close to Xia. Lu Yin looked at the man with a strange gaze. If this guy knew that Xia was below the tower, would he be unable to sleep? He could even wake up from his dreams. Outside the tower, the maid Yao Tiao quickly bowed when she saw the man return. The man had a helpless expression. "Lord Yebwa, please." He watched as Lu Yin stepped into the tower. From now on, his days would not be so easy. Lord Xinwu would definitely cause trouble for him. Lu Yin expressionlessly walked through every nook and cranny of the tower as soon as he stepped inside. The man did not know what Lu Yin wanted, but he did his best to entertain him. Lu Yin looked at the man. "What level is your Corpse King transformation?" The man hurriedly replied, barely red eyes. "You're being modest." "No, I'm definitely not being modest. Let's spar." The man was startled, and the image of Xinwu being trampled on appeared in his mind. He quickly refused. However, Lu Yin did not give him a chance to speak. He grabbed at the man's neck, and the man subconsciously circulated his strength to resist. This person's strength was very ordinary and could not even compare to the monarch's aura. However, it was not bad that he had reached the progenitor realm. Lu Yin easily broke through the man's defenses and pressed down on his shoulder. This was not as easy as it seemed, and the man immediately felt intense pain as half of his body was about to be crushed. His eyes turned sinister as his eyes turned red. He struck out at Lu Yin, a sharp weapon appearing in his hand. It was very small, but it was very sharp. Lu Yin allowed the man's palm to land on his body, and under the man's shocked gaze, Lu Yin flung him out of the tower. The tower was destroyed and Lu Yin's clothes were torn apart. The man landed on the ground and coughed, clutching his shoulder as he looked up. Lu Yin rushed out, again. The man was shocked and he used a power similar to that of the ancestral realm. However, he was unable to resist Lu Yin's power, and he was smashed into the ground. Directly below him was Xia. Lu Yin did not stop there and he followed closely behind the man. The moment he entered the ground, he was close enough to control Lu Yin. At the same time, Xia opened his eyes. At this moment he was no longer Xia but Lu Yin. In his vision, the man was smashed down and Lu Yin was following closely behind. Lu Yin controlled Xia's body and passed over the man, sending a palm straight to the sky. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Lu Yin returned to his body, twisted and tore through the void to disappear. The moment Lu Yin disappeared, the palm from the ground shattered the starry sky. This was Xia's palm, and it was so powerful that it attracted Diqiong's attention. Diqiong appeared instantly. What happened? Xia grabbed the progenitor and walked out from the ground. He faced Diqiong. I don't know. Diqiong frowned and glanced at the man. Was that palm worth it? That palm, the target, no, was him. It was Yipa. Diqiong was shocked. Yipa? Why is he here? Why did you slap him again? Where is he? He reacted quickly and escaped. Xia was controlled by Lu Yin and had lost his memory of that palm. However, Lu Yin only controlled him for a moment. When he returned to his body, Xia clearly saw that he had hit him and that Lu Yin had tore through the void to escape. Xia threw the man on the ground, and the man was knocked unconscious by Xia's palm that brushed past his body. However, he woke up quickly and held his head as if he had a headache. Chapter 3066. In his confusion, the man saw the arch and Diqiong. He turned pale with fright. Greetings, Lord Diqiong. Diqiong stared at the man. What happened? The man was confused. What happened? What just happened? He felt that what happened was inexplicable. He told Diqiong about his encounter with Yi Bo and their sparring. After that, he looked at the arch. Why was the arch here? He seemed to be underground. At this moment, a stargate opened far away. Diqiong looked over. Yi Bo had returned. Lu Yin returned to the Above Heaven sect and told Wang Wen about the incident as quickly as possible. He asked them to think of a solution while he rushed back as soon as possible. He could not stay in the Above Heaven sect for too long. The only problem was that he could not confirm the exact time when Diqiong and the rest attacked the 5 spirit races. Lu Yin quickly arrived in front of Diqiong and bowed. Greetings, Lord Diqiong. Diqiong sized Lu Yin up. He could not figure out why he had hit Lu Yin. Perhaps he had been disturbed during his cultivation. However, to be able to remain unscathed under his palm, this Yi Bo was indeed worthy of defeating Xinwu. What happened? Diqiong asked. Lu Yin was scared. I was sparring with someone and did not expect to encounter the arch underground. I was hit and thought that the arch wanted to help X and Wu deal with me, so I ran away. After hearing Lu Yin's explanation, Diqiong was expressionless. It was just a small matter. No one knew that the arch was here. It was normal for Diqiong to attack when he was disturbed during his cultivation. Diqiong left. This matter was not worth his attention. Diqiong had also left. It was a coincidence that they had met, so he wanted to find another place. Only the man was confused. Lord Yi Bo, what happened? Lu Yin was indifferent. How would I know? However, you are neighbors with the arch. Not bad. The man was scared. He would never have thought that Diqiong was right next to him. If he had known, he would not have built a tower here. It was not safe underground. Speaking of which, why was the arch underground? Suddenly, the man felt very insecure. He decided to turn the surrounding ground upside down. Otherwise, he would never be able to sleep. It was too scary. Let's spar again if there is a chance. Lu Yin left, leaving the man confused. He felt that everyone around him was crazy. After returning to his tower, Lu Yin heaved a sigh of relief. It was settled. Now he just had to wait for Diqiong. When he returned to the heavenly sect this time, he knew that the Limitless Empire had run away. To be honest, it was a pity that the Limitless Empire was also a human. If they were dragged into the battle against the Eternals, they would be a great help. Although the Limitless Empire was not very strong, they were at least comparable to a sequence law adept. However, they ran too fast. Moreover, the 3 symbols of the divine dwelling nation were also dead. This made Lu Yin feel even more regretful, as the death of the 3 divine beasts meant that the divine kingdom had been crippled. Without the help of the 3 divine beasts, the divine lady would be weaker than an ordinary person. The only good news was that the Divine Residence Nation did not suffer too many casualties. Could be said that Di Qiong had saved them. Everything had its own karma. Because of him, the 6 parties had attacked the first zone of calamity, causing the eternal race to send reinforcements to the other zones of calamity. Because of the limitless empire, he had accidentally arrived at the divine dwelling nation and saved them. All of this was too coincidental. Lu Yin looked up at the dusky sky. Was there really a cycle of karma? Saruzin could see his karma, which was the guilt in his heart. Muji could also see evil, which was part of this world. Whether it was matter or not, it all had its own fate. Then who was the one who had decided this fate? If the Lu family's exile had really been decided by someone, then were his enemies the Shaoyin divinity and Wang Fan, or the person who had decided this fate? Once the human race was destroyed, who should he seek revenge on? The eternal race? Or the person who had decided this fate? If this was really fate, then was the existence of the eternal race also part of it? If there really was a predetermined fate, then humans were truly ants. Lu Yin did not know when Di Xia would come looking for him, so he decided to roll his die again. This time he would use the power of wood and roll a 6. He wanted to see if it could be integrated into Muji's body. He was extremely wary of Muji and he did not know what Muji was really thinking. It would be best if it could be integrated into Muji's body, but if not, he would just kill himself. He knew that Muji had not told Di Qiong about his suspicions when he had integrated into Di Xia's body. Muji dared to scold the only true god, so he was not loyal to the eternal race. Lu Yin hoped that Muji was a spy who had joined the eternal race. However, if that was the case, then half of the true god guard captains were spies. Lu Yin felt sorry for the eternal race. In the following days, Lu Yin kept rolling his die. 1, 3, 5, 4 and so on, but he could not roll a 6. In the blink of an eye, more than a month had passed. Di Xia finally came looking for him. Lu Yin looked at him warily. No need. Look at it this way. I was disturbed. That's why I unconsciously struck. I didn't think that I would hit you, Di Xia said. Lu Yin looked at him. Why are you looking for me? Di Xia's face could not be seen clearly, but Lu Yin could feel that he was staring at him. Attack the 6 Direction Society. Lu Yin was surprised. Attack the 6 Direction Society? Me, everyone. Who else? 3 Prime Lu Hao. Lu Yin was shocked. 3 Prime and Lu Hao want to attack the 6 Direction Society? Why? Di Qiong said in a low voice. The Eternal Clan Z region. No, the 6 forces will attack the E region several times. The Earth Clan has decided to eradicate the 6 forces. The 3 forces, 6 forces and how will all attack? The 6 forces will have no chance of survival. Lord Di Qiong asked me to ask if you want to come with us. You can deal with the enemies in the air and time you are in the Lu clan, right? Lu Yin rejected decisively. I'm not going. Di Xia's tone changed. Why? Lu Yin was serious. You don't understand how strong the 6 Direction Society is now, especially the primordial spaces above Heaven sect. They are unfathomable. After Lu Yin took over, experts appeared one after another. They even broke into the first domain of calamity. I don't want to die. This time it's the 3 Prime Lu Hao, Di Xia said. Lu Yin shook his head. The one true god is injured and in seclusion, not to mention the 3 Prime and Lu Hao. In my opinion, the 3 Prime and Lu Hao have more means to protect themselves. Once they encounter danger, they won't die, but I might not. Di Xia was silent for a moment. So, you don't plan to take revenge? Lu Yin stared at Di Xia, wanting to see his face clearly. You know about my vendetta? I don't, but you hate humans. This is a chance. I will think of a way to take revenge, but not now. I feel that if I participate in the chosen of deities and reach the level of the 3 Prime and Lu Hao, it will be easier for me to take revenge in the future. There won't only be one chance, Lu Yin said. Di Xia did not try to persuade him any further. Fine. However, if you want to understand, come to me. Enter, attack the 6 Direction Society. The date set is 10 days from now. That will be the day the 6 Direction Society is destroyed. With that, Di Xia left. Lu Yin watched as Di Xia left. 10 days from now? The date was really accurate. If Lu Yin did not know, he would have jumped in even if he felt that it was a trap. After all, it concerned the life and death of the entire 6 Direction Society. Of course, there was also the possibility that the Eternals knew that Lu Yin was Lu Yin and were using this method to make him lower his guard. Even if the Six Directions Society knew that the Eternals would attack, the Six Directions Society would not put up any defenses. However, this possibility was extremely low and unnecessary. Even if there was such a possibility, Lu Yin had already told Wang Wen about it, and Wang Wen and the others would be prepared. If the Three Prime and Lu Hao really attacked, it did not matter whether the Six Directions Society was prepared or not. If the Eternals attacked, the Six Directions Society would definitely be defeated. Lu Yin continued to roll his die. He wanted to merge into Muji's body now, and there were still 10 days left. He hoped that he could make it in time. Luck was still on Lu Yin's side. He had not rolled 6 pips back then, but on the day that Di Qiong and the others left, Lu Yin managed to roll it. He rolled the die with his wood space-time force, and when his consciousness appeared in the dark space, he only saw a ball of light. It was not bright, which meant that this ball of light represented a power that did not surpass his own. Lu Yin rushed over and merged into it. In an instant, memories flooded out and Lu Yin opened his eyes. He was overjoyed. It was Muji. He had finally succeeded. Lu Yin could not wait to check Muji's memories. He had not cultivated his with space-time force much, so he had limited time. First, he had to confirm whether Muji had told the ancestor and the others about his speculations. Even though Lu Yin felt that Muji had not, there was nothing more reliable than personally checking Muji's memories. Next, he had to check Muji's speculations about Hui Wu, Wang Xiaoyu and the others, as well as Muji's stance. Lu Yin wanted to know all of these. This time he had only merged with Muji's memories for a very short period of time, and Lu Yin did not even have enough time to look through Muji's memories before his consciousness returned to his body. He looked into the distance and heaved a sigh of relief. He also felt a little emotional. Humans were complicated. Their emotions, thoughts, actions and so on were all things that no one dared to say that they could completely see through a person. Muji was one such person. He was a genius through and through. The Samsara roulette had allowed him to become the wood god's disciple and leave his name in the wood being scripture. Even in the Six Paths Society, this was an extremely high honor. Even in the reincarnation spacetime, his status was not much lower than the 3 sovereigns and 9 sages. The wood god valued him greatly. In order to nurture him, he had not only taught him cultivation techniques, but had also specially nurtured his knowledge, allowing him to learn many things. The experts of the once glorious above heaven and the Six Paths Society had even told him about the primordial realm and the existence of bitter adversity. They had also told others that one could obtain eternal life and transcend. This had caused Muji to have an unimaginable obsession with eternal life from the very beginning. It was precisely because of this that Muji had taken the wrong path. Muji had once asked the wood god, "Master, can you obtain eternal life?" The wood god shook his head. "Master cannot do it. Since ancient times no one has ever done it." "Can the Grand Empyreans obtain eternal life?" "Not yet." "Can the once glorious above heaven obtain eternal life?" "No." "Who can obtain eternal life?" The wood deity thought for a moment. "In today's universe, the only true God of the Eternals is probably the one and only true God of the Eternals. That is why we are always at a disadvantage. Little G, you must remember to work hard and cultivate. Everyone must do their best to fight against the Eternals, save humanity and protect the Six Directions Society." Chapter 3067. The wood god's words had shaken Muji's faith. What he wanted the most was eternal life. Humans could not do it, but the Eternals could. This was what his master had told him. Since that was the case, why would he cling to humans? A seed was planted, and what made it germinate was the Eternals' words. Humans, corpse kings and astral beasts are just manifestations of life in the universe. Why cling to them? Because of this, Muji betrayed the wood god and was removed from the wood person sutra. The wood god was furious, and the wood god lost a talented cultivator while the Eternals gained a true god guard captain. When Lu Yin saw these memories, the first thing that came to his mind was that Patriarch Lu Yuan had not told him about Kuai. They had thought that telling him too early would affect his cultivation. He had not cared at the time, but now it seemed that the Patriarch had foresight. Some things were known too early and the consequences were unpredictable. The wood god cared too much about Muji and wanted to nurture him in all aspects. He had nurtured Muji's desire for eternal life, but he had not pointed him in the right direction. Muji was a traitor, but he had not truly joined the Eternals. He wanted to transcend. If he could betray the wood god, then he could betray the Eternals as well. He only wanted the true God's ultimate technique because it could allow him to transcend. His goal was very clear. He looked down on the Eternals from the bottom of his heart, which was why he could casually insult the only true God. He was proud because his starting point was much higher than others. Many people spent their entire lives without knowing about the existence of progenitors, but he had stepped into the Wood Person Sutra and learned about eternal life. His prideful nature made him think of a way to obtain the true God's ultimate technique. He did not want to expose Lu Yin and Hui Wu to be rewarded by the Eternals. Everyone had different personalities, and if it had been the Shaoyin Divine Sovereign, he would have already revealed that Lu Yin might be Yebwa. Lu Yin also knew that he had been deliberately sunk into the Divine Power Lake to find the true God's ultimate technique. He had searched all the tributaries of the first zone of calamity, but he could not find the one that had sunk into the wrong person's lake. There were berserk corpses there and no one was allowed to enter. In order to obtain a true God's ultimate technique, he was willing to be submerged in a lake for 100 years. In order to transcend, he was willing to betray the wood spacetime. In order to join forces with Lu Yin, he was willing to curse the only true God. This was Mu Ji, a person who only had goals and no emotions. He had already gone mad. Therefore, he naturally wouldn't tell the founding ancestor about Yebwa Huiwu or Wang Xiaoyu. If he wanted a few people in the everlasting race who could join forces with him, these spies were the best choice. He didn't believe that a human traitor would side with the Eternals, and the Corpse King couldn't work with him either. Lu Yin and the others were his only choice. More importantly, he had his own ambitions. He could betray the humans, but he also wanted to one day obtain a true God's ultimate technique and return to the human race. If he wanted to return, he naturally had to pay a price. He wanted to establish his own faction within the Eternals. It had to be said that this idea was even crazier than obtaining a true God's ultimate skill, but that was what he wanted. Lu Yin's alliance with the humans was the same as Mu Ji's alliance with the Eternals. However, there was one thing that made Lu Yin feel relieved. Mu Ji wasn't as certain as he had made himself out to be. The evil he had seen was just a rough estimate. He had been certain that Yebwa was Lu Yin himself, but he had only been stalling for time and bluffing. Even Wang Xiaoyu had very little evil. After Huiwu had left, the corpse god had been severely injured. This was only his guess, but it was all a bluff. This person was very shrewd. Lu Yin looked into the distance, thinking about how to use Mu Ji. Unfortunately, if not for the limited time and the limited power of the wood spacetime, he would have tried to commit suicide and have Mu Ji die. Suicide was not easy and some powerhouses found it difficult to die even if they wanted to. Lu Yin had no way of controlling Mu Ji's suicide in such a short time. The next day, Di Qiong returned, but the Six Direction Association showed no reaction. It was as if they didn't know that they were going to attack. This meant that Yebwa and Mu Ji were fine. First, two blades, Wu Ho and Wang Ho were fine as well. Lu Yin knew that this attack was fake, but he had deliberately told Wang Wen about it because he was worried that Huiwu would be tested. If the Eternals wanted to test the Six Direction Association, they would test all the captains of the true gods. If Huiwu told the Six Direction Association that they were going to be attacked, they would be exposed. Now that the Six Direction Association knew about this, even if Huiwu had a way to send the news back, the Six Direction Association would not be discovered. The test was over, and the next step was to attack the 5 spirit tribes and the Trimoon's alliance. Lu Yin narrowed his eyes. Even if he had been prepared for this still made him uneasy. He wondered how Wang Wen and the others would prepare. Another day passed and Di Qiong left with Di Xia. Lu Yin walked out of the tower and headed in Mu Ji's direction. He knew where she was. Not long after, Lu Yin found Mu Ji. Mu Ji looked at Lu Yin. Yebwa, what's the matter? Have you thought it through? Many figures appeared in the Trimoon's alliance's spacetime, including Di Qiong and Di Xia. They had thought that this would be an unbridled massacre, but instead of the Trimoon's alliance, they saw Wood God, Void Master and other experts from the Six Direction Association. Oh no, something went wrong. At the entrance of the first zone of calamity, Celestial Champion Dushabag raised his golden staff and smashed it down. Come again, first zone of calamity. Celestial Champion Dushabag killed his way into the first zone of calamity. At the same time, in the third zone of calamity, Lu Yin approached Mu Ji. You want to find the true God's ultimate technique? Mu Ji asked. Why? Are you going to say it out loud? I don't know what you meant by what you said to me before, and I don't know who that person is, but I want to find the true God's ultimate technique as well. I have a map of the divine power lakes here and it might be helpful, Lu Yin said. He was already 8 meters away from Muji. Muji frowned. This kind of thing is useless. Perhaps the true God's ultimate technique is hidden in some corner, and we can find it with the map. It's not something you should say. What if this is a map of all the divine power lakes in the 6 zones of calamity? What did you say? A map of the 6 zones of calamity? Muji was shocked. Lu Yin was calm. If a true God placed the ultimate technique under the divine power lakes, then there must be some kind of pattern. Only a true God can clearly see the locations of the 6 zones of calamity. Through this map we can also see it. Muji's eyes burned with passion. If it was just a map of one zone of calamity, then he would not have cared, but 6 zones of calamity were different. Take it out and let me see. Lu Yin took a step forward and the scene in front of him changed. He directly controlled Muji's body, took out the wheel of life and death and spun it. At the same time Muji grabbed Lu Yin's body. Lu Yin seemed to be unable to resist and Muji grabbed him by the neck, making it difficult for him to move. Lu Yin controlled Muji's body to tear through the void, and in an instant his consciousness returned to his body. Muji was awake but he was confused. How did he grab Yibo's neck? Before he could react, Lu Yin pushed him into a spatial crack with a palm. The entire process was very fast and Lu Yin had rehearsed it many times in his mind. He wanted to be seen by others so that he could report it to Diqiong. From an outsider's point of view, the entire process looked like Muji had suddenly attacked Yibo, and for some reason Yibo had been unable to resist. However, Yibo had attacked in the next second, and Muji had used Yibo's palm to escape into the spatial crack. Everything had seemed so smooth and the spatial crack had been torn open by Muji himself. He had premeditated his escape. After Muji disappeared into the spatial crack, a figure quickly approached him. It was the woman he had seen on the observation platform, and she was the expert who was second only to Diqiong in the 3rd zone of calamity. Fei. Diqiong had indeed sent people to watch him. What's going on? Fei shouted as she stared at Lu Yin. Lu Yin coughed. I don't know. He suddenly attacked me and even stole my cosmic ring. Fei saw that Lu Yin's finger was bleeding. Cosmic ring? She wanted to ask more questions, but a terrifying aura suddenly descended from the distance. Not good. In the 3rd zone of calamity at the center of the Eternal Kingdom, a stargate opened, and Lu Yuan walked out just after Muji had left. The stargate that Lu Yuan had used was Lu Yin's, but it had been stolen by Muji. Lu Yuan walked out of the stargate and saw the imprisoned Wu Tian. Although he had expected this, he still couldn't help but roar when he saw Wu Tian. Wu Da. On the observation platform, Wu Tian's eyes widened and he said in a hoarse voice, "Fertile soil." Lu Yuan appeared in front of Wu Tian. "I'll take you back." "Wait." Wu Tian wanted to say something, but Fei broke through the void and swept her leg towards Lu Yuan. Lu Yuan casually pushed her back, and in the next moment, Lu Yin appeared, his divine power surging as he attacked Lu Yuan. Lu Yuan showed no mercy as he raised his palm and pressed down. Heaven and earth froze as Lu Yin's body was pressed down by the palm. Fei hurriedly reached out and dragged Lu Yin out. The Eternal Kingdom was reduced to dust, and the 3rd zone of calamity trembled under Lu Yuan's might. No one could stop him. Lu Yuan casually tore open the chains and was about to leave with Wu Tian. Wu Tian fell to the ground, his skin torn apart. His body was extremely weak, but he would not die. Lu Yuan grabbed Wu Tian's arm and Wu Tian gripped Lu Yuan's arm, his eyes red. "If I could leave, I would have done so long ago. Fertile soil, I am the one who is destined." Scope. Not far away, Fei's eyes disappeared, and she charged towards Lu Yuan with the eyeless transformation. Lu Yuan didn't even look at her. A Xidagarba needle appeared in his palm and pierced through the void. Fei wanted to dodge, but she couldn't. The needle seemed to ignore time and it pierced through her body, nailing her to the ground. Her blood dyed the ground red. "What did you say?" Lu Yuan stared at Wu Tian in disbelief. Wu Tian pushed Lu Yuan away. "Let's go." At this time, the entire 3rd zone of Calamity's divine power lake surged towards the observation platform. Lu Yuan let go of Wu Tian, clenched his fists and tore through the void. He looked back and said, "Don't die." With that he stepped into the void and disappeared. Not far away, Lu Yin was at a loss. Why didn't he save Wu Tian? This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Why didn't he take Wu Tian away? What was the ancestor doing? Chapter 3068. Spitting out a mouthful of blood, Lu Yin could not help but squat on the ground and gasp for breath. Di Qiong appeared in the sky. They had returned. The 5 spirit tribes and the 3 Moons Alliance were clearly prepared for this. They had been betrayed. They thought that their probing was over, but at this moment, there was definitely a spy among the Eternals who could directly contact the important figures of the Six Paths Society. This spy could not be ignored. Wu Tiandu was almost rescued. Di Qiong looked down and saw Yi Bo, who was squatting on the ground, and Fei, who was nailed into the ground. Finally his gaze fell on Wu Tian. He frowned and descended. Di Qiong looked at Wu Tian from the spectator stand. Wu Tianping lay on the observation platform and looked at the dark sky. "Why aren't you leaving?" Di Qiong asked. "Tired. You clearly had a chance to escape." Wu Tian did not reply. Di Qiong's eyes flashed coldly as he said, "You will still be tortured here. You are Wu Tian, one of the 6 Dao of the 3 realms. Are you really willing to accept this?" Wu Tian stood up slowly and sat on the martial arts observation platform. He looked at Di Qiong and said, "You are pathetic." Di Qiong squinted his eyes and his face darkened. "How long have you imprisoned me? You relied on my strength to reach your current position. Compared to the 3 realms and the 6 Daos, you seem to be on equal footing, but are you really on equal footing?" Wu Tian's voice was hoarse, but it sounded fearless. "Do you know why I didn't leave? I know it, fertile earth knows it, but you don't know it. You 3 masters and 6 boundless don't know it either. What makes you think you can compare to us?" All of a sudden, Di Qiong pressed Wu Tian's head onto the ground and said, "I'm the one who's at your mercy now. You're just a piece of rotten meat. Don't talk about the 3 realms and 6 paths. Who do you think you are?" Did he really think that he was still the Wu Tian from before? "Your disciples are all from the 7 sky gods and have betrayed humanity. Who do you think you are? What use do you have? If I want to kill you, I can do so at any time. Keeping you alive is just torture. Do you really think that you created a weapon cultivation method? That's just your space-time. In the entire universe, you are nothing." Wu Tian's face was pressed to the ground. It looked like he was being humiliated and tortured, but he smiled and said, "You are very sad." Di Qiong's pupils constricted and he was furious. At this moment Lu Yin stood up. "My lord, the traitor is Mu Ji." Di Qiong stared at Wu Tian, but Wu Tian did not even look at him. He just stared into the distance. No one knew what he was looking at. After a while, Di Qiong let go of Wu Tian and kicked him into the ruins of the wall. "You have to die if I want you to." Phew. What a joke. He then appeared by Fei's side and led the 2 of them away. Lu Yin looked at the observation platform. Why didn't the patriarch take Wu Tian away? He clearly had a chance. "What's going on? Speak." Di Qiong's tone was cold. This time the Eternals had been completely fooled. The 5 spirit tribes and the Tri-Moon Alliance had been prepared for this. The first zone of disaster had been invaded by Heavenly Lord Victor, and Wu Tiandu had almost been rescued. Although he didn't know why Wu Tian didn't leave, this result made him even more uneasy. Why didn't Wu Tian leave? It was like a thorn in his heart. Lu Yin told Di Qiong what had happened. Although Fei was severely injured, she did not seek treatment immediately. Instead, she reported what she had seen to Di Qiong. Di Qiong frowned. "So, Lu Yuan came to the 3rd zone of disaster because of the Stargate he gave you?" Lu Yin said in a low voice, "Yes. Mu Ji suddenly attacked me. His innate gift is too strange and I couldn't react in time. He controlled me for a moment, took my cosmic ring and then ran away." "My lord, Mu Ji doesn't have the 3rd zone of disaster." "The Stargate of the zone of disaster?" Di Qiong's eyes were cold. "Mu Ji? Of course not. He was the captain of the True God Guard who had been injured in the 1st zone of disaster. He was sent to the 3rd zone of disaster by the ancestor. He did not belong to the 3rd zone of disaster, so he was not given a Stargate. They did not need to give him a Stargate when they were testing him. After all, if he was exposed, he would not return even if he had a Stargate. Another reason why they gave Yi Bo a Stargate was that Yi Bo was suitable for cultivating the Corpse King transformation. He was a talent that Di Qiong appreciated. Furthermore, Yi Bo cultivated godly power, so Di Qiong did not think that he was a traitor. Now it seemed that Mu Ji was indeed a traitor. He took Yi Bo's cosmic ring and let Lu Yuan save Wu Tian. However, why didn't he tell the Six Direction Society about the test? How did he know that the clan's true target was the 5 spirit tribes and the Tri-Moon Alliance? Fei returned. She had been severely injured this time. Lu Yuan had not held back at all. It seemed that he had attacked Lu Yin heavily, but in reality it was all fake. Fei's injuries were far worse than Lu Yin's. Not long after, Lu Yin also returned. Muji was a traitor, so he could not even return. Lu Yin had even taken his cosmic ring. He could not even return to the first zone of disaster, let alone the third zone of disaster. If he wanted to return to the first zone of disaster, he would have to pass through the endless battlefield in the zone of disaster where Zhou Xian was. Did he dare to do so? He was definitely going to be the scapegoat. This was a very risky move. If Muji had a way to contact the ancestor, he would definitely expose Lu Yin. Lu Yin originally wanted to save Wu Tian and leave. Yi Bo's identity could be used to its fullest potential. However, he did not expect that the ancestor would not take Wu Tian away. He would visit Wu Tian every once in a while to find out what had happened. In the first zone of disaster, Di Qiong arrived. Where's Guizhi? The ancestor looked at Di Qiong. Wuji or Yi Bo? Di Qiong did not understand. Why would you suspect Yi Bo? He cultivated godly power. The ancestor said faintly, before we find out, everyone is worthy of suspicion. Muji. The ancestor was not surprised. Indeed, he is more likely. What about Wu Tian? He did not leave. He did not leave voluntarily. He clearly had the chance to leave with Lu Yuan. The ancestor was shocked. He did not leave voluntarily? Why? Di Qiong shook his head. I also want to ask you why. Do you think I know? At least you should know better than me. The ancestor shook his head. Then you guessed wrong. I do not know. Di Qiong looked at the ancestor. He said that the 3 masters and the 6 Daoists are not comparable to the 3 realms and the 6 Daoists. He did not leave. The 3 realms and the 6 Daoists know, but the 3 masters and the 6 Daoists do not. The ancestor looked at the godly power lake in a daze. They are not comparable. Di Qiong frowned. My strength is not inferior to Wu Tian's. The ancestor was indifferent. It is not just a matter of strength. Even if both of you were on the same level, you would not be able to advance any further. However, he has a path. Di Qiong's eyes flashed. You should know better. Back then you were also one of the strongest experts in that era. You were not inferior to the 3 realms and 6 paths. The ancestor was helpless. But I fell. Di Qiong wanted to say something but was interrupted by the ancestor. You can go back now. Even if Gu Yizhi knows, he will not tell you. Di Qiong looked at the ancestor deeply. Whether you know or not, I do not care. Wu Tian's life and death are in my hands. Such an opportunity will not appear in the future. The ancestor did not speak. First, the participants of the Chosen of Gods in the disaster region. Are you sure? Di Qiong suddenly asked before he left. The ancestor's back was facing him. Yes. Di Qiong lifted his leg and disappeared. After he left, the ancient god arrived. You really want to compete with the 3 realms and 6 paths? The ancestor looked at the ancient god. Why did Wu Tian not leave? The ancient god shook his head. I don't know. If Lu Yuan knew beforehand, he would not take the risk to save Wu Tian. Wu Tian must have told him something. If he told me the same thing, I might know, but he did not tell me. Alright, you don't know? The ancestor replied, of course not. Then I don't know. Di Qiong returned to the 3rd zone with an ugly expression. He did not get an answer from the ancestor and was even ridiculed. This made him very unhappy. In this Chosen of the Gods battle, he had to suppress the 1st zone. The 1st zone thought that it was the strongest among the 6 zones. He had to embarrass them. As he thought about it, he summoned Di Xia and Fei. Looking at Fei's severely injured appearance, Di Qiong frowned. Can you recover during the Chosen of the Gods battle? Fei thought about it and bowed. I dare not delay you. Di Qiong took a deep breath and closed his eyes. Fei was as good as dead. Lu Yuan's Xidagarba needle was not that easy to block. She was lucky that she did not die. There were only a few experts in the 3rd zone. Other than the 1st zone, the other zones were about the same. Even the 4th zone's emptiness was gone. Under the Emperor should be able to defeat the other experts from the zone of disaster, but the 1st zone of disaster was different. From Xin Wu's injuries, it could be seen that the person who attacked was not weak. At least he could fight against under the Emperor. Now that he had lost Jade, his side was at a disadvantage. After thinking about it, Xianwu could not do it. Who else could? After thinking for a while, Di Qiong thought of Yibo. This person had defeated Xianwu before. Although it did not mean that he was stronger than Xianwu, he had extraordinary attainments in divine power. What was the strongest power of the Eternal Tribe? It was divine power. If it was focused on divine power cultivation, he might have a chance to replace Fei and represent the third zone. Thinking about it, he looked at Fei again. Are you sure you can't recover? Fei said respectfully, I can at most use 80% of my strength. Di Qiong shook his head. That was not enough. The other zones were not weak. 80% of their strength was enough to defeat them. What do you think about Yibo? Di Xia looked up. He can dodge my palm. He is not weak. Fei replied, I fought with him at the observation platform. It will be difficult for him to replace me in a short time. Di Qiong's eyes flickered. It was difficult to replace Fei, but this was an opportunity. Fei had no hope of winning the Chosen of the Gods battle. He wanted to let Yibo try. If Yibo could not replace Fei, the third zone would have to rely on Di Xia. At the thought of this, Di Qiong asked Di Xia and Fei to leave. He went to look for Lu Yin. Lu Yin had been staying in the tower. Di Qiong's sudden appearance shocked him. He instinctively wanted to escape as he thought that he had been exposed. Yibo, how are your injuries? Di Qiong asked directly. Lu Yin took a deep breath and bowed slowly. My lord, I am fine. Di Qiong looked at Lu Yin. It is good that you survived Lu Yuan's palm. It is a miracle that your injuries are not serious. Lu Yin quickly explained, that palm was blocked by divine power. I took the opportunity to dodge it. Lu Yuan was paying attention to Wu Tian at that time. He did not even look at me. I know. Fei told me. She also saved you. Yes. If not for Fei, I would have died. Chapter 3069. This was also the reason why Di Qiong did not suspect Lu Yin. If Fei had not intervened at the critical moment, Lu Yuan's palm would have killed Yebwa. If Yebwa was really a spy, Lu Yuan would not have been so ruthless. May I know what orders you have for me? Lu Yin asked respectfully. Di Qiong said, the Chosen One battle is about to begin. Fei has been severely injured by Lu Yuan, so it is unlikely that she will participate in the battle. I would like to see if you can replace her and participate in the battle. Lu Yin was shocked and quickly rejected. I have fought with Fei before. Even if she is injured now, it is unlikely that I can defeat her. If I am not wrong, Fei should be a sequence order warrior. Di Qiong placed his hands behind his back. Sometimes the sequence order warrior is not that strong. You true god guards have killed more than one sequence order warrior. You should know this very well. But I am definitely not Fei's match now. Give it a try. Try your best to cultivate your divine power. Fei is unable to cultivate her divine power. This is her biggest flaw. Lu Yin was really shocked this time. Fei is unable to cultivate her divine power? Yes, during the battle with Patriarch Lu Yuan, Fei did not use her divine power. In the third zone, Xianwu and Di Xia had used their divine power, but Fei had not. Di Qiong lamented, not everyone can cultivate the godly power. Jade is extremely talented in the Corpse King transformation. As a human, she was able to cultivate the Corpse King transformation to the Eyeless transformation. It is extremely rare. I don't think there are any other geniuses like her in the other regions. Unfortunately, she can't cultivate the godly power. Lu Yin thought of Hui Wu. He was proud that he was able to cultivate to the Eyeless transformation as a human. Now Fei was able to do the same in the third zone. Lu Yin, who had cultivated the Corpse King transformation, knew how difficult it was to cultivate to the Eyeless transformation and have one's own emotions. It was extremely rare. He did not know how Hui Wu did it. It was indeed something to be proud of. Di Qiong looked at Lu Yin. In the Chosen One battle, 6 people will be selected to participate in the final battle. The final winner will be the candidate for the 3 Masters and the 6 Boundless. If any of us dies, the winner will replace him. Even if he is not the 3 Masters and the 6 Boundless, he will still be at the 7 Sky level in the first zone. You should know the 7 Sky level. The Sky's position in the clan is not lower than the 3 Masters and the 6 Boundless. Not to mention, the winner may even become a true god's disciple and obtain a true god's ultimate skill. Once a true god's ultimate skill is cultivated, one's strength will be extremely terrifying. At this point, Di Qiong seemed to have thought of something. His eyes were filled with fear and greed. He also wanted to cultivate the true God ultimate skill, but it was difficult for him to do so even with the 3 powers and 6 Cs. Only those who were allowed to cultivate by the true God would be able to do so. Otherwise, they would have to find a way to cultivate by themselves. Even Di Qiong would not dare to say that he would be able to do so. Wei Shu, Muji, and the others weren't the only ones in the Eternal Race's 6 zones of calamity searching for the true God realm's ultimate skill. Even 3 high masters and 6 vast seas were searching for it. The chosen of the gods was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Lu Yin said respectfully, "It is this subordinate's honor to represent the 3rd zone in the chosen battle, but this subordinate cannot guarantee victory. After all, the participants should all be experts of the sequence laws. That's why I asked you to cultivate divine power. Divine power can suppress the sequence laws. This is your only chance." Di Qiong glanced at Lu Yin coldly. In the eternal tribe, the strongest power will always be divine power. It is the most common power, but it is enough to turn defeat into victory. Can even help you reach the top in a single step. I allowed you to participate in the chosen of gods. Even if you can't win, I don't want you to be eliminated too quickly. Otherwise there will be no more Yi Bo. We don't have many corpses in the 3rd zone, so we have to increase our numbers. With that, Di Qiong left. Lu Yin's eyes flickered. He was not confident that he could compete with an expert of the sequence laws, especially with Yi Bo's identity. No, it seemed that he had to meet Wu Tian as soon as possible. Or he had to leave. Unfortunately, he had just pushed the blame to Muji. It would be a waste to leave now. Lu Yin thought about it and clenched his fist. He decided to continue rolling the die until he rolled 6 pips. Then he would merge with Di Qiong's body and commit suicide. No matter what, he had to use this method to defeat a strong opponent. Possible he would use this method more often. No matter how many experts the Eternal Clan had, they would not be able to handle him. If he wanted to do it, he would do it. There were still a few days before he could roll the die. He had to roll 6 pips, kill Di Qiong and leave. The Eternal Clan's zone of calamity was cold. Whether it was the 1st zone or the 3rd zone, the other zones were the same. They rarely communicated with each other. Only the chosen battle could allow the various zones to communicate. On this day, a dark cloud appeared in the 3rd zone, pressing down on the sky as it moved towards the Black Mother Tree. The moment the cloud appeared, Lu Yin's heart palpitated. He felt an indescribable discomfort, as if he had fallen into water and could not breathe. He looked at the sky through the tower. What were those dark clouds? Everyone in the 3rd zone, be it the Corpse Kings, humans or other creatures, all looked at the sky watching the moving clouds. In the direction of the Black Mother Tree, Di Qiong stood quietly. The dark clouds were getting closer and closer. Eventually they shrunk until they were only a few dozen meters wide. Within the dark clouds, an eyeball popped out and stared at Di Qiong. Di Qiong frowned. "Ruins, what are you doing in the 3rd zone? I heard that you were tricked by the 6 Direction Society again. What? Have you found the traitor?" Di Qiong's tone was cold. "It has nothing to do with you. Hehe, we are both masters of the 3 pillars and 6 Cs. How can it have nothing to do with me? I don't mean to criticize you, but how can there be a traitor? Especially in the 3rd zone, where everyone is cultivating the Corpse King transformation. Without emotions, how can there be a traitor?" Di Qiong clasped his hands behind his back. The traitor came from the 1st zone, not the 3rd zone. But he was in the 3rd zone when it happened. What are you trying to say? I heard that the 6 Direction Society wanted to take Wu Tian away, but Wu Tian willingly stayed. Is that true? Di Qiong looked at the eyeball, which was moving strangely. So what? The eyeball moved again and stared at the observatory. Interesting, very interesting. It seems that Wu Tian staying in the 3rd zone is not because of you, but because he doesn't want to leave. Di Qiong, you have been proud of capturing Wu Tian for so many years. Don't you feel like you have been slapped in the face? Hehe. Di Qiong's eyes were cold. What are you trying to say? You are not welcome in the 3rd zone. The eyeball stared at Di Qiong again. I want Wu Tian. Impossible. Di Qiong rejected it directly. The eyeball's pupils glowed red. You have had Wu Tian for a long time. What's the harm in giving him to me? You have obtained everything you can from Wu Tian. Even your ancestral world has successfully transformed. Di Qiong, you are already another Wu Tian. We call you Dark Wu Tian. Wu Tian is useless to you. Di Qiong said, even so, I will not give it to you. What if I must have it? The dark clouds suddenly expanded and covered the entire third zone. Di Qiong's eyes widened and a long spear appeared in his hand. He pointed it at the dark clouds. Take it if you can. Destroy the third zone as well. Do you have the ability to do so? Ruin. The dark clouds rolled as if it was the end of the world. Countless people in the third zone panicked and feared. Di Xia Fei and Exen walked out and looked at the dark clouds. In the towers, the progenitors felt their hearts tremble. The dark clouds gave them an indescribable sense of danger that was no less than Di Qiong's. Lu Yin stared at the dark clouds. Another 3 pillars and 6 boundless. The true strength of the Eternals was becoming clearer. The dark clouds threatened the entire third zone, but Di Qiong remained unmoved. After a while the dark clouds retracted. Forget it. I am not confident that I can do anything to you. Di Qiong, you may be able to stop me, but what about the next one? They all want Wu Tian. They want to know why Wu Tian refuses to leave. You are not the only one who wants to stand shoulder to shoulder with the 3 realms 6 Dao. We all want to know the difference between the 3 realms 6 Dao's thinking and ours. You don't want the third zone to be targeted by other zones, do you? Di Qiong put down his spear. I will know why Wu Tian refuses to leave. I will tell you then. Waiting is not our style. How about this? Let's make a bet. Let's bet on the chosen of gods. If you win, I will agree to any conditions. If you lose, I will send Wu Tian to the second zone. Why should I bet with you? If you don't, the Corpse King tablet will collapse. Di Qiong squinted his eyes and stared at the eyeball. The eyeball stared back at him. Alright, how do you want to bet? I propose the bet, but you can decide the terms. You can decide how you want to do it. Di Qiong's face darkened. The more confident Ruins was, the stronger the representative of the second zone would be. If both from the second zone succeed and both from the third zone fail, you win. This condition could be said to be shameless. No matter how confident the second zone was in itself, even if it was certain that the 2 participants would be able to pass the Chosen of God's battle, how could it guarantee that the third zone's 2 participants would fail? The Chosen of God's battle wasn't a battle of names. There was a specific way, and to a certain extent this way was related to luck. Di Qiong wanted to use this condition to force Ruins to back off. However, Ruins agreed to it. Sure, as long as you are happy. Di Qiong's face darkened. If Ruins had agreed to it, then how strong would the second zone's representative be? Even if Di Qiong was confident in Di Qiong, he did not dare say that he would definitely succeed. Since ancient times, the Eternals had held many Chosen of God's battles, and each time they had sent out a top powerhouse. Di Qiong himself had walked out of a Chosen of God's battle, so he knew how cruel it could be. This was especially true for Immemorial City. Even if he went there again, he could not guarantee that he would return alive. The bet is set. Di Qiong, let me remind you, don't let anyone else in. Otherwise, I won't be the only one you have to bet with. After saying that, the dark clouds dispersed without any warning. The eyeball also turned into ashes and disappeared. Di Qiong immediately activated the third zone's sourcebox array. No one could enter or leave. Wu Tian had not only attracted Ruins, and Di Qiong was already uneasy about betting with Ruins. After all, Fei was heavily injured and Di Qiong had not even decided on a second representative. If he bet with the other zone's representative, it would mean that the third zone's representative would challenge all the other zones, which was impossible. Chapter 30-70. Lu Yin's heart sank when the third zone of calamity was sealed. He could not go back or even leave the third zone of calamity. He could tear the void apart, but the time required would be extended. The extended time was enough for Di Qiong to attack him. This is bad. What exactly happened? Why did Di Qiong seal the third zone of calamity? Di Qiong suddenly appeared. Lu Yin was shocked. Was he going to attack him? Di Qiong appeared and looked at Lu Yin. This Chosen of God's battle is very important to me. There is no time for you to get used to it. I have to choose between you and Fei as soon as possible. Yibo, let me see how talented you are in the path of divine power. Let me see if you are worthy of my training. Di Qiong then grabbed Lu Yin. Lu Yin resisted the urge to attack and was thrown into the divine power lake. With a splash, Lu Yin fell into the divine power lake. Di Qiong stood beside the divine power lake, deep in thought. If Yibo was not talented in the path of divine power, he would focus on healing Fei's injuries and increasing her strength as much as possible. He was forced to the cliff by the Ruins. Wu Tian could not be given to anyone else. Only he was qualified to have Wu Tian. Without Wu Tian, how could the third zone of calamity still be called the third zone of calamity? On the other side, Lu Yin fell into the divine power lake. He cursed under his breath. What happened to Di Qiong? Di Qiong had told him to train as much as possible before, but now he was forcing him to train like a madman. The divine power lake was completely made up of divine power. Lu Yin could only absorb it when he fell in. Regardless of whether he absorbed it or not, the divine power would enter his body. This was the origin of the berserk corpse. The divine power rushed into Lu Yin's body from all directions and rushed towards the starry sky in his heart. Lu Yin could only concentrate on absorbing the divine power. However, there was a desire to kill in his mind. This desire came from the divine power lake. There was too much divine power. He did not dare to recite the primogenitor's scripture in case the only true God found out. He could only absorb the divine power himself and stay awake. He could do it. He did not believe that the divine power lake could fill up the starry sky in his heart. Di Qiong would not let him stay down there for too long. He wanted to see his talent clearly, not nurture the berserk corpse. After an unknown period of time, Lu Yin was in a daze under the divine power lake. He did not know how much time had passed. A force reached into the bottom of the lake and brought him up. At this moment, Lu Yin's entire body was flushed red. His hair, skin, and even eyes were exactly the same as when Muji had been brought up. The difference was that Muji had soaked for 100 years, while he had only soaked for a short period of time. Di Qiong looked at Lu Yin in amazement. You are indeed gifted in divine power. You have absorbed so much divine power in such a short period of time. If you were to be made into a corpse, you would be the strongest corpse in history. Unfortunately, corpses are useless to us. Lu Yin stared at the ground, his pupils dilating and shrinking. It was as if he had lost consciousness and his entire body was trembling. Divine power turned into mist around him, forming a vortex. Di Qiong looked at Lu Yin and said, "You are turning into a berserk corpse. Yibo, if you can hear me, recover yourself. Otherwise you will become a berserk corpse." Di Qiong grabbed Lu Yin and threw him towards the tower. He had done this in order to test Night Moray's upper limit. If Night Morays could survive this test, then Night Morays would be worth giving up Jade to nurture. Perhaps Night Morays would become a surprise soldier for the third calamity region of the Chosen of Gods. But if Night Morays turned him into a berserk corpse, then so be it. He's going to help Jade recover. As for Yibo, he actually didn't have much hope for him. Lu Yin was thrown towards the tower by Di Qiong. He smashed hard against the wall and fell down. He curled up and tried to resist the divine power that was eroding his mind. After 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, he finally stopped trembling. Di Qiong was no longer watching him. He was faking it. He had absorbed a lot of divine power under the divine power lake. The divine power planet in his heart was about the same size as the other planets. When he first entered the first calamity region under the guise of Night Morays, his divine power planet was only a dot. But now it was so big. Lu Yin knew that the total amount of divine power in his body was close to that of the 7 heavenly gods. With so much divine power absorbed, it was natural for him to behave strangely. Di Qiong thought that he was struggling on the edge of sanity. But Lu Yin only felt murderous and crazy when he was under the divine power lake. Once he left the divine power lake, he became normal again. He sat up and let out a deep breath. Fortunately, the entire calamity region was connected by the divine power rivers. Otherwise, Di Qiong would have noticed that he had absorbed so much divine power. But this was not the way to go. He had absorbed too much divine power, but he did not know how to use it and how to achieve Di Qiong's expectations. He did not plan to participate in the Chosen of Gods, but now he was forced to. He could not go to Wu Tian either. Wu Tian was Di Qiong's underling and would definitely be watching him. Lu Yin stood in the tower and looked towards the observation platform. He slowly opened his heaven's eye and looked at Wu Tian. At the same time, Wu Tian was still suspended in the air by the chains. When Lu Yin opened his heaven's eye, he opened his eyes at the same time. In the tower, Lu Yin's forehead was burning. The world was spinning and his vision was blurred. His thoughts were rising, surpassing the land of the calamity region, the sky, and everything he could see. He did not understand and subconsciously wanted to close his heaven's eye. Child. Lu Yin stopped and was at a loss. In my life, the thing I loved the most was researching all kinds of weapons and battle skills. Thus, I named myself Martial Heaven. In my life, my greatest gain was this Martial Heaven's memory. I hope that this memory can help you. Lu Yin stood in a daze. His entire being seemed to have ascended. Everything disappeared. The land of the Calamity region, the everlasting tribe and divine power disappeared. All that was left was the dark sky. Suddenly, the sky split open and a divine eagle cried out. Lu Yin's expression changed. A divine eagle? In the sky, the divine eagle stretched out its claws and swooped down towards Lu Yin. Lu Yin wanted to resist, but before he could do so, the eagle pierced through his body and headed downwards. Lu Yin quickly looked down and saw that a lake had appeared beneath his feet. The despicable fish had jumped out of the lake. The divine eagle stretched out its claws and tore through the void, freezing it in place. The despicable fish swayed its fins and drew a strange curve in the void. It broke the frozen void and plunged into the bottom of the lake. The divine eagle's sharp claws scratched the surface of the lake, leaving deep scratches, but it returned to the sky unwillingly. Lu Yin's gaze followed the eagle as it soared and he saw the claw clearly. That claw seemed to be able to erase space itself. What was that? Before he could think any further, the divine eagle suddenly shattered. A black stream of air pierced through the eagle's shattered body and transformed into a Golian that slashed horizontally. Lu Yin's pupils shrank. The Grim Reaper? The Grim Reaper held the Golian and streaked across the sky, dragging death energy with it as it slashed down. The Golian slashed at Lu Yin, causing his hair to stand on end. He couldn't block it, definitely couldn't. This Golian was enough to completely tear him apart. The Golian pierced through Lu Yin, causing him to feel a bone-chilling cold. He reached out to grab it, but it mysteriously disappeared. Lu Yin's hands landed on nothing, and a sword pierced through his head from afar before disappearing in an instant. Lu Yin stood there in a daze. He understood that this was a scene that Wu Tian had seen before. Everything that Wu Tian had seen, everything that he had studied, everything that he had seen, everything that he had studied, everything that he had seen, everything that he had seen, everything that he had studied, everything that he had seen, everything that he had seen, everything that he had seen, everything that he had seen. This was something that Wu Tian had always cared about since ancient times. Lu Yin just stood there and watched as the battle techniques were unleashed one after another. They either brushed past his body, streaked past his eyes, or disappeared halfway. It was as if he'd been possessed, and his eyes were unfocused as he continued to watch. He saw the churning of the ancestral Mang, the Qing Luo sword sky, Mavis strength, the thread of fate, and the shattering of the first continent. The continent that had given birth to countless geniuses had suddenly shattered. The moment the continent shattered, Lu Yin suddenly became clear-headed as his entire body fell into a bottomless abyss. With a thud, he fell flat on the ground and stared blankly at the top of the tower. In his mind, he replayed the various battle techniques that he had used since he had stepped onto the path of cultivation. Some of them were simple while others were complex. At this moment, Lu Yin saw another version of himself stand up and reenact the battle techniques that he had seen, including the scenes that he had seen in the sky of martial arts. What was martial? Was it movement? Was it strength? Was it fighting? Was it fighting against the heavens? Was it fighting for control of his own body? Countless thoughts flashed through Lu Yin's mind, and he was completely dumbfounded as he lay flat on the ground and stared blankly at the top. He didn't see anything, but at the same time he saw everything. Time passed day by day and Lu Yin didn't know how much time had passed. Perhaps it was a day or perhaps it was 100 days. On this day, Lu Yin's lifeless eyes suddenly lit up. He stood up and instantly appeared at the top of the tower. He raised a hand and slowly waved it towards the distance. First move, setting sun, world's end splendor. In the third zone of calamity, a setting sun suddenly appeared on the horizon, but it was blocked by clouds. The red light illuminated the ground of the zone of calamity, attracting the attention of countless people. When had there been a sun in the zone of calamity? Why was there such a setting sun here? As Lu Yin waved his hand, the setting sun slowly disappeared, and the zone of calamity returned to normal. At the same time, Di Qiong looked in Lu Yin's direction with a rare expression of shock. Was this the power of intent? At the top of the tower, Lu Yin had completely regained his senses after he lowered his arm. He raised his hand and looked at his palm. What had just happened? What was that battle technique? Di Qiong suddenly appeared and looked at Lu Yin in amazement. There was a hint of disbelief in his eyes. Yibo, did you create that battle technique? Lu Yin was nervous and had unconsciously used that battle technique. To be honest, he had created it himself, but he didn't know how he had created it. It was as if he had transformed his understanding of battle techniques into another form. This was the realization that he had gained after a long period of cultivation. He hadn't expected Di Qiong to appear. Yes, my lord. Di Qiong sized Lu Yin up. Do you know what battle technique it was? Lu Yin shook his head. I was corroded by the divine power in the divine lake. There was nothing in my mind other than the scenes that I had seen before. I don't know how I created it. Please enlighten me, my lord. Chapter 3071. Di Qiong exclaimed, that is an artistic conception. Only those who have achieved great enlightenment can understand it. Some people can understand it when they are children, and some people can't even understand it when they reach the level of 3 powers and 6 Cs. This is an artistic conception. The battle technique you just used belongs to the artistic conception. From now on, Yibo, you are the second person to participate in the Chosen One battle of the 3rd zone. Lu Yin was shocked, but I am no match for Fei. She's no match for you. Conception is an unfathomable power. No one can say for sure whether it's the conception that's stronger or the sequence rules that are stronger. But one thing is certain, and that is that no one will take the initiative to walk the path of the conception, because they can't, including me. Perhaps you will not be able to master the sequence rules in the future. However, with this artistic conception, even if you do not have divine power, you will not be weaker than the sequence rules powerhouses. It all depends on how strong your grasp of this artistic conception is. The most terrifying artistic conception battle technique I have ever seen. With a single thought, the world will end. It can make everything cease to exist, but it can also make everything return to the beginning. You have also walked out of the erosion of divine power. As I said before, as long as you can walk out of the erosion of divine power, you can represent the 3rd zone. Lu Yin lowered his head and did not look at Di Qiong, but he could hear his desire for artistic conception. Artistic conception? This was not his first artistic conception battle technique. His first artistic conception battle technique was the overturning sky palm. In the overturning sky palm, the sky was above, the earth was below, and the earth was in the sky. The move just now was the setting sun. It was the understanding of martial arts and the attack of martial arts. As long as one cultivated it, they would enter the world of martial arts and be attacked by the setting sun. Lu Yin finally understood why Lu Xiaoshuan's creation of the overturning sky palm had attracted the great ancestor Lu Yuan. It was because of the power of artistic conception. Di Qiong and the great ancestor Lu Yuan would be amazed. He also understood why Lu Xiaoxian could create the overturning sky palm. Artistic conception had nothing to do with one's cultivation or age. Children could see through concepts, but 3 high and 6 fast couldn't. This was a concept, a mysterious and profound power. Even 3 high and 6 fast couldn't walk down this path. Whether or not they could walk down this path depended on luck and whether or not they could achieve great enlightenment. Di Qiong was very envious of Lu Yin, as what he had said was true. He wanted to comprehend the power of intent as well, but such power could not be forced. If Yibo had not been there, then only Di Xia and Fei would have been able to participate in the 3rd region of calamity. Mu Ji's betrayal would have been an established fact, and Lu Yuan would have also appeared to save Wu Tian. Fei would have definitely been injured as well. Only Yibo was an outsider. Before the Chosen of God's battle, Yibo had brought him to the 3rd calamity region. He had even taken the initiative to cultivate the Corpse King transformation and requested to stay behind. He had been lucky enough to not be severely injured when facing Lu Yuan, and he had even been thrown into the Divine Power Lake to comprehend a concept battle skill. All of this seemed to be a gift to the 3rd calamity region, allowing the 3rd calamity region to stand out in the Chosen of God's battle. That's right, this Yibo was prepared for this battle. The more Di Qiong looked at Lu Yin, the more he liked him. Indium-based battle skills are not easy to master. In a few days I will find you an opponent to test out your battle skills and see how powerful they are. Lu Yin respectfully replied, as you wish, my lord. Di Qiong nodded, satisfied. By the way, are you interested in Wu Tian? Lu Yin did not deny. I was born in the origin space. Wu Tian is a legend in the 3 realms and 6 paths, Since you are interested, you can go and take a look. With that he left. Lu Yin returned to the tower and heaved a sigh of relief. It was too dangerous. He had unknowingly used a battle skill that he had created and lured Di Qiong over. If it had not been Di Qiong but the one true god, it would have been over. However, the one true god should not have been lured out so easily. He was injured and needed to go into seclusion to recover. Lu Yin looked at the observation platform. Senior Wu Tian was the one who had led him to the martial arts sky and comprehended a concept battle skill. This was the concept battle skill that he had comprehended using Lu Yin's identity. Di Qiong allowed him to meet Wu Tian, but he could not rush it. On the other side, Fei requested to meet Di Qiong. My lord, what was that just now? An Indium-based battle skill created by Yi Bo. Fei was shocked. He created an Indium-based battle skill? Di Qiong looked at Fei. Yi Bo will take your place in the Chosen One battle. Do you have any objections? Of course not. I am injured and do not dare to delay the Chosen One battle, Fei replied respectfully. Di Qiong nodded. Even so, if Yi Bo is no match for you with his divine power and Indium-based battle skill, you should still participate in the Chosen One battle. Therefore, I plan to let the two of you compete in a few days. Fei lowered her head. Yes, my lord. She was not stupid. Although it was called a competition, it was actually a chance for Yi Bo to practice his Indium-based battle skill. However, there was no other way. This was the reality of the Eternals. The strong were respected. Xinwu was severely injured by Di Qiong, but she did not dare to complain. From now on, Yi Bo's position in the Third Calamity region would surpass her. He would be second only to Di Qiong. If his Indium-based battle skill was really powerful, he might surpass Di Qiong in a few years. On the other side, Di Qiong looked away. Indium-based battle skill? Yi Bo was able to avoid his palm and suppress Xinwu. He was definitely not weak. Now that he had an Indium-based battle skill, it seemed that he would be the one to participate in the Chosen One battle. Di Qiong wondered how powerful Indium-based battle skills were. A few days later, Di Qiong brought Fei and Lu Yin to a corner of the Third Calamity region. Lu Yin and Fei faced each other. They had fought briefly on the observation platform. Lu Yin had been injured by Fei's strange swordsmanship and had been flung away by her strength. This time he wanted to see the power of Indium-based battle skills. This was what Di Qiong and Fei wanted to see as well. In fact, even Lu Yin did not know how powerful Setting Sun was. A thin sword appeared in Fei's hand and her pupils disappeared. She had used the eyeless transformation. The short fight on the observation platform had not been enough for Fei to display the terrifying power of the eyeless transformation. Now when Fei used it, a terrifying power accompanied the tip of her sword. This sword made Lu Yin's heart palpitate. Fei was a sequence law powerhouse. When she used the eyeless transformation, her physical strength was no weaker than a mid-plate's. Lu Yin retreated step by step. The tip of her sword was still like a living thing, but this time, Lu Yin saw something different. He saw that Fei's sword was not the tip of a sword but a claw. Suddenly, the scene of the divine eagle catching the warship fish appeared in his mind. Fei's sword was exactly the same as the divine eagle's claw. Lu Yin was stunned. Seeing the tip of the sword coming, Lu Yin instinctively dodged to the side. The tip of the sword tore through the void and cut the ground in half. A strand of hair fell. Fei stared at Lu Yin. Are you in a daze? Lu Yin was indifferent. I just want to break your sword. Swordsmanship. But I dodged it. I also pulled back my strength. The tip of the sword landed on the side of Lu Yin's face. Fei and Lu Yin were less than a meter apart. They could see each other clearly. As soon as she finished speaking, Fei's sword moved horizontally and slashed across Lu Yin's neck. She took a step forward and held the sword hilt in her hand. Lu Yin did not expect such a move. This was not swordsmanship. At least he had never seen such a move from other swordsmen. It was equivalent to giving up the sword. The divine power in Lu Yin's body was boiling. Using the appearance of the divine power, his pupils turned red. It was almost the same as the Corpse King transformation. At this moment he used all his strength. His hands overlapped to block the sword hilt. Fei's left hand hit Lu Yin's chest from an invisible angle. At the same time Lu Yin raised his leg and kicked out. Bang! There was a loud bang. The void distorted and tore apart. The divine power swept in all directions with a terrifying force, causing the corner of the third disaster zone to tremble. The two separated at the same time. Fei was amazed by the strength of Lu Yin's Corpse King transformation. The red eyes transformation had blocked her eyeless transformation. Lu Yin was also surprised by Fei's unconventional swordsmanship. She clearly had a sword technique that he was afraid of, but she gave it up just like that. Especially when combined with the Corpse King transformation, it was always successful. Although the exchange was short, he could see some things. The one he was most satisfied with was Di Qiong. A battle between experts could be earth-shattering, and it could even cause space to crack. It could also be dangerous in close combat. The Corpse King transformation was the path of close combat, and Fei's Corpse King transformation combined with her swordsmanship was something that ordinary experts could not withstand. Lu Yin's Corpse King transformation had transformed his strength, and his reaction had been so fast that he could dodge Fei's sword technique. He was indeed worthy of being recognized as the captain of the True God Guard in the first disaster zone. Fei tightened her grip on her sword hilt. You are indeed qualified to represent the third disaster zone. However, almost all the participants in the Chosen of Deities are experts of the sequence laws. I will have to use my full strength next. Lu Yin was solemn. Bring it on. Fei stabbed out with her sword. Just like before, Lu Yin knew that she had used the sequence laws this time. But what were the sequence laws? He could not use his celestial eye to check, so the only way was to use his divine power to counteract it. He did not hesitate to use his divine power, and it exploded like a beam of light connecting the sky and the earth. It attracted the attention of many cultivators and corpse kings in the third disaster zone. Dixia looked over as well. This Yibo had a lot of divine power. Fei's sword was blocked by Lu Yin's divine power before it could even get close to him. This was within her expectations. Her divine power would eventually run out. She knew very well how much divine power a progenitor corpse king could have. Even if Yibo had a unique talent in the path of divine power, he could not have too much. She wanted to use up Lu Yin's divine power. If it were a heavy ghost or a captain of the True God Guards like the Game of 1,000 Faces, Fei's sword technique and corpse king transformation would be enough to break through the divine power. However, Lu Yin was not weak. If Fei was confident that she could defeat Lu Yin without using the sequence laws, she would not have used the sequence laws. Don't waste time. Yibo's divine power is not something you can use up. Yibo, that's enough. Di Qiong reminded her. Fei's gaze turned cold as she stared at Lu Yin. Lu Yin's divine power surged around him, isolating him from the world. Fei was unable to get close to him. He faced Fei and suddenly raised his hand. Between heaven and earth, there was a trace of a setting sun. This setting sun seemed to be on the horizon, but it also seemed to be right in front of him. Di Qiong's eyes widened. His gaze was burning. Even he was tempted by this concept battle technique. Chapter 3072. Fei felt strange, as if she was being enveloped by the setting sun. Warmth? No, it was an indescribable feeling. She only knew that she had broken away from something. Looking at Lu Yin, she felt that he was so close yet so far away, as if she would never be able to touch him. She wanted to take a step forward, but her body could not move. Her battle techniques, her strength, and everything she could use seemed to have been sealed. Lu Yin looked at Fei and said, "Setting sun, burn your martial arts. Setting sun, sharing afterglow." As soon as he finished speaking, he waved his hand. Setting sun to Lu Yin, Di Qiong, and the countless creatures in the third disaster zone seemed to have been blown away by a strong wind. At the same time, Fei's expression changed drastically as a feeling that she had never felt before spread throughout her body. She felt like a puppet as her mind went blank and she could not do anything. She spat out a mouthful of blood and loosened her grip. Her thin sword fell to the ground with a clang. She recovered from her eyeless transformation state and slowly fell to the ground. Setting sun was beautiful, but it was also deadly. She had lost. Lu Yin looked at Fei, who had fallen to the ground. He had not expected this move to be so powerful. Fei was a sequence law powerhouse, but Setting Sun had defeated her. Not far away, Di Qiong was amazed. This was a concept battle technique that was comparable to the sequence law battle techniques. However, it was much harder to cultivate than the sequence law battle techniques, and there was no way to cultivate them. With Yi Bo's current strength, his non-concept battle techniques were very ordinary. He could barely block the attacks of sequence law powerhouses, but if he used a concept battle technique, his opponent would not be able to block it. He had a chance to determine the outcome of this battle. Yi Bo, Lu Yin looked at Di Qiong and said, "Here." The Chosen of Divinity battle is about to begin. Do not use setting sun unless you have no other choice. This is your chance to determine the outcome of the battle. If you are guarded against, the effect will not be as good, Di Qiong reminded him. Lu Yin quickly agreed. Soon Di Qiong left. He did not care about Fei at all. Lu Yin looked at Fei. This woman's swordsmanship was the same as the one Wu Tian had shown him. What did that mean? Why did she know that kind of swordsmanship? You're not dead, right? Lu Yin asked. Fei's fingers moved as she supported herself on the ground. She stood up and looked at Lu Yin with shock. This is a concept battle technique? Lu Yin looked at Fei. Where did you learn this swordsmanship? Very peculiar. Fei didn't reply. She looked deeply at Lu Yin before leaving as well. There was no one around and Lu Yin let out a sigh of relief. He really wanted to meet Wu Tian, but the timing was getting worse and worse. Di Qiong was definitely keeping an eye on him, and it would be over if he revealed any flaws during their meeting. Since he couldn't leave even if he wanted to, all he could do was wait. The Chosen of God's battle? The participants were all the strongest people in each calamity zone, second only to the 3 high and 6 fast. He wanted to see what kind of strength these people had. One day he would have to face these people. Dark red godly power shrouded the land of the zone of disaster. 2 starry doors crashed down and smashed into the center of the 3rd zone of disaster. Di Xia Yi Bo, each choose a starry door to enter. Behind the starry door is your opponent. Kill your opponent and you can officially participate in the Chosen One battle. Otherwise you will be disqualified. Di Qiong's voice echoed in the 3rd zone. Countless corpse kings in the 3rd calamity region were facing the Stargate, and there were many human cultivators among them. Xingwu was also looking at the Stargate. He longed to participate in the battle of deities chosen, but he did not expect that Yi Bo would beat him to it. Even though he was unwilling, he had no choice. Apparently, Lu Fei was only second to Di Xia in the 3rd zone of disaster. The area around the Stargate was barren and Lu Yin arrived in an instant. He looked at the Stargate in front of him and realized that this was the beginning of the Chosen One battle. Not everyone could participate in the trial. Only those who had gone through the first trial would be able to withstand the subsequent trials. This was because the true Chosen One battle's trials were extremely cruel. This was what Di Qiong had told him. Through Wei Shu, Lu Yin knew that the true Chosen One battle's trial was headed to Immemorial City. If it really was Immemorial City, then it would indeed be very cruel. Di Xia appeared and entered the Stargate without hesitation. Lu Yin also did not hesitate and stepped into the Stargate. Behind the Stargate was a deep expanse of space. He subconsciously opened his celestial eye and scanned his surroundings. His eyes narrowed. Another one. The Eternals still haven't given up and want to pass through my territory. Scram. A shout came from afar. Lu Yin could not see anyone, but he hurriedly moved out of the way. Through his celestial eye, he could see that his surroundings were filled with stray particles that covered the entire area. In terms of numbers, they were not much less than the 7 sky gods and were comparable to woodcut. This was an absolute powerhouse. The space where he had been standing collapsed with the sound of metal grinding against metal. Lu Yin saw stray particles forming chains that were heading towards him. They were not just coming from where he had been standing, but from all around him, up in the sky and down on the ground. Lu Yin hurriedly used his divine power, causing his dark red divine power to boil and explode. Disgusting power. A man walked out from afar. He was tall and sturdy and his entire body was covered in muscles. He held a large rough blade in his hand and pointed it at Lu Yin. Tell me your name, you eternal scum. I don't kill nameless people. Lu Yin was apprehensive. Around him, countless stray particles formed chains that frantically wrapped around him. Even though they had not broken through his divine power, they still imprisoned him in this space. I can't let this continue. Even though I don't know what other tricks this person has up his sleeve, these sequence law chains are already restricting my movements. As he thought about it, Lu Yin raised his hand. Wrapped in his divine power, he smashed apart the sequence law chains in front of him. Good power. Corpse King transformation, you emotionless creature. Die. The burly man raised his blade and slashed down at Lu Yin from above. When the blade landed, it was accompanied by a sharp and mournful ghostly sound that stung Lu Yin's ears. Above his head, the blade flashed with a cold light. Lu Yin hurriedly dodged and the blade slashed past him from the side, tearing through the starry sky. The blade slashed horizontally, and Lu Yin grabbed the hilt of the burly man's blade. The burly man was surprised. "You have some eyesight. What a pity." After he said that, a new blade appeared behind the hilt. It suddenly rotated, and with a hiss, Lu Yin's arm was cut open. At the same time, the burly man was also injured by the blade. But he did not care, and he slashed again while laughing maniacally. Lu Yin frowned. Damn it, this guy was fighting with his life on the line. Was he not afraid of death? If his opponent was a corpse king, Lu Yin would not be surprised, but this was definitely a human. Unable to figure out his opponent's methods, Lu Yin retreated again. "Ah, so you're not a corpse king. You're afraid of death. Kid, fight with me. The more afraid you are, the easier it is to die. Take my blade." The burly man's blade was not a normal blade at all. It could be used at all angles, and it could slash at his opponent as well as himself. He was like a blade that could not be approached. But in all directions, chains formed by the sequence law continued to coil around him. Lu Yin released his divine power wildly and pushed it out. He wanted to use his divine power to completely destroy the burly man. Outside the barrier, the burly man sneered. He had faced divine power countless times and was very familiar with it. "How long can your divine power last?" Lu Yin's divine power could last for a very long time, but it was impossible to win against the burly man. "Who are you?" Lu Yin asked. The burly man was amused. "You came looking for trouble with me. Don't you know who I am?" Lu Yin's face fell. If he wanted to pass the Chosen One battle, he had to kill this person. But this person was an enemy of the Eternals and was an absolute expert. How could he kill him? "I'm a prisoner of Immortal City. Remember, don't die without knowing who killed you." The burly man roared and suddenly flung his blade. The blade flew out and shot over like a dart. On the way, it was spun 3 times by the sequence law chains and stabbed at Lu Yin. This blade was not a blade technique at all. This person had completely abandoned blade techniques. Rather than calling it a blade technique, it was more like he was playing with a blade. Lu Yin was shocked by the burly man's words. Immortal City? This person was an expert from Immortal City? This was Immortal City? Impossible. There was no time to think. The blade stabbed into the divine power. The man called prisoner grabbed the hilt and flung it out again. Every time he flung it out, the power of the blade increased, and the divine power was torn apart. Lu Yin gritted his teeth. No matter who his opponent was, he was definitely being watched by the Eternals. It would be too suspicious if he did not make a move. As he thought about it, the blade stabbed in again. It was less than a meter away from him. The sequence law chains were all around him. Lu Yin faced prisoner and raised his hand. Setting Sunday. A beautiful setting sun appeared in the darkness of the starry sky. It was like a painting. At this moment, prisoner felt the same as Jadeite. It was as if he was wrapped in something that gave him a strange warmth. The blade shot over from afar, but it could not destroy this beautiful painting. Lu Yin waved his hand and the blade fell to the ground. Prisoner's expression changed and his mind went blank. It was as if he had lost something very important. He spat out a mouthful of blood. Intent. Battle technique. Lu Yin took advantage of prisoner's injury and hurriedly attacked. Looked like he wanted to kill prisoner, but he had not used his full strength in that setting Sunday. He had not used his full strength against Jadeite either. Lu Yin slapped at prisoner, but the prisoner did not dodge. Lu Yin's eyes flickered. Why didn't he dodge? With this person's strength, he should have been able to dodge. That setting sun should not have been enough to incapacitate him. However, prisoner stood in place as if he had been heavily injured and could not move. He had already tried his best and there was no way he could go easy on Yizichen. He was definitely going to lose this battle. It was fine if he lost the chosen battle and it was fine if he didn't go to Immortal City, but he still didn't want to give up his identity as Yebwa. This identity might be of great use to him. This attack could not kill prisoner. Boom. Lu Yin's attack landed on prisoner, but its power was limited. It was not that Lu Yin did not attack on purpose, but that his body was being held back by the sequence law chains, making it difficult for him to continue his attack. Prisoner looked up. Intent battle technique. I'll definitely kill you. Inescapable net. The heavens changed as countless chains formed a nebula that extended into the distance. These were not chains formed by the sequence law, but rather from the ancestral world. Prisoner had used the ancestral world. At the same time, Lu Yin felt a familiar power. It was astral source power. This prisoner was someone from the primordial space. Chapter 3073. Immemorial City, Primordial Space. If Lu Yin's guess was right, this person should be an expert from the primordial space who had gone to Immemorial City, just like Su Wangtian. Trapped in the ancestral world and bound by the endless nebula chains, Lu Yin unleashed his divine power in an attempt to break out of Prisoner's ancestral world. But Prisoner raised his arms and tore apart the divine power with the chains of sequence particles. He grabbed Lu Yin's shoulder tightly and grinned, baring his front teeth. "Let us die together." The entire space suddenly shrunk. It wasn't the real space but rather Prisoner's ancestral world. The chains shrunk to their limit as if the entire space had been detonated, bringing with it a terrifying pressure. Lu Yin was shocked and felt a chill run down his spine. If he could withstand this attack, he would not be far from death. This person actually wanted to die together with him. Grabbing Prisoner's arm, Lu Yin exerted force and with a crack, Prisoner's arm broke. However, Lu Yin used his chains to hold it together. Lu Yin kicked out and the surrounding space collapsed as it shrunk to its limit. Lu Yin's entire body seemed to be compressed into a single point, and he could not help but bleed. "Do you really want to die?" Lu Yin shouted. Prisoner laughed. "This is my ultimate move, one of the 108 suicide techniques. How is it? Strong enough, right? Lunatic." Lu Yin's gaze turned cold and he waved his right hand again. Again he coughed up blood and his arms drooped weakly. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Lu Yin retreated, only to discover that there was a real chain wrapped around his waist. "This chain?" Prisoner looked up and blood flowed from his mouth. He looked ferocious. "This is a concept battle technique. I won't let you go. Again, 108 suicide techniques. Have a taste." He grabbed one end of the chain and charged at Lu Yin alone. Lu Yin saw a sword stabbing at him from behind, and its target was not only him but also Prisoner. This person clearly wanted to die together with Lu Yin. Lu Yin had no choice but to use Setting Sun for the third time, causing the sword to fall while he rushed towards the astral door. However, he could not break free from the chain around his waist. Prisoner held on tightly. "Hee, I said I wouldn't let you escape." Again, 108 suicide techniques. This time his ancestral world appeared once more and shrunk rapidly. "Let's die together." Lu Yin took a deep breath and looked around. Even if this is a test, this person is already heavily injured. "Don't you plan to act?" "I failed." No one answered. Prisoner's gaze looked crazed, but his eyes were extremely clear. "Examination? So that's how it is. It's a pity that you don't understand me, but those old monsters behind you do. Do you think I'll die so easily?" Lu Yin raised his brows. So that's how it was. It had been a fake. This guy had a way to survive even if they were to perish together. Kid, consider yourself unlucky to run into me. In the past, those who ran into me in the Chosen of Gods all died. Even if you don't die here, you'll still die in Immemorial City." The ancestral world's pressure caused Lu Yin to cough up blood again. "I am one of the 9 mountains and 8 seas of the Above Heaven sect. Remember this." Prisoner roared. If he wasn't going to die, then things would be much easier. He raised a hand and summoned Kanyang. Prisoner's eyes widened. It was this move again. He didn't believe that he wouldn't be able to withstand it. In the next moment his body trembled and he coughed up a mouthful of blood. He looked in front of him in shock. This time it was much fiercer than the previous 2 times. Lu Yin gave Prisoner a deep look before turning to leave. He didn't hold back when he used Setting Sunday. "Let's hope Prisoner doesn't die. You were the one who said that you wouldn't die. One of the 9 mountains and 8 seas?" That was the era of the Above Heaven sect. Lu Yin passed through the astral gate and returned to the 3rd region of disaster. Behind him the astral gate shattered. His face was pale and he coughed up blood. He knelt on one knee and panted heavily. Seemed like he was severely injured. Di Qiong walked out with an ugly expression. "You failed." Lu Yin stood up with difficulty and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. He bowed. "I'm sorry, my lord. I failed." Di Qiong squinted and glanced at the other astral gate. He then looked back at Lu Yin. "Who was your opponent?" Lu Yin hadn't expected Di Qiong to not know. "Prisoner. I heard that he's from Immemorial City." Di Qiong was shocked. "You actually ran into that lunatic. No wonder you failed." Lu Yin looked at Di Qiong. "You know him?" Di Qiong looked at Lu Yin. You used setting sun? 3 times. You didn't have a chance to kill him. He was looking for an opportunity to perish together with me. Although I used setting sun to its limit and severely injured him, I had a premonition that I still couldn't kill him. That's why I came back. Di Qiong frowned. You really can't kill him. Everyone in Immortal City is crazy. He's one of the more difficult ones to kill. Even Di Xia can't kill him, let alone you. Forget it. Let's wait. Yes. Lu Yin didn't dare to leave. He stood there and waited for Di Xia with Di Qiong. After a while, Di Qiong muttered to himself. 5 succeeded. 2 died. Lu Yin looked at Di Qiong's back. 5 of them had succeeded and 2 of them had died. Including himself, there were 8 participants who had come out with results. He didn't know who the 5 who succeeded had killed. Were they from Immortal City? Or were they from Six Direction Sect? Either way, they must be enemies of the Everlasting Tribe. Another hour passed. Di Xia walked out of the astral gate. Behind him, the astral gate shattered. Di Qiong looked at him. Di Xia bowed respectfully. Fortunately, I didn't disappoint you. I succeeded. Di Qiong heaved a sigh of relief. Well done. Yibo had failed in the bet with Ruins. If Di Xia failed as well, Di Qiong could only pray that someone from Ruins' second zone would fail as well. At least they wouldn't lose the bet. In fact, there were very few who could pass every chosen one battle. It was unlikely that both participants from the second zone would pass. No matter how powerful Ruins was, it was impossible for them to cultivate 2 experts who were close to the 3 Prime and 6 Boundless tribe. However, it was safer for them to succeed than for them to fail. Di Qiong also hoped that Di Xia would pass the test and become a substitute for the 3 Prime and 6 Boundless tribe. He had his own plans. As for Lu Yin, he didn't blame him. Even if it wasn't Lu Yin, it wouldn't be a problem of failure. He would definitely die. Di Qiong was very sure of this. Although Lu Yin failed, it was good enough that he came back alive. The final results were out. Out of the 12 participants in the 6 zones, 8 won and 3 died. Only Lu Yin failed and came back alive. Lu Yin's heart sank when he heard that there were 8 successful participants. This meant that 8 of the Everlasting Tribe's enemies had died. The Everlasting Tribe was too powerful. There were a total of 8 experts. Even if 1 or 2 of them passed the test in Immortal City, they would be a great threat to the 6 Direction Guild if they joined the first zone. Lu Yin thought about it. Maybe it was a good choice to participate in the Immortal City test and kill 1 or 2 of them. How could he participate if he had already failed? He glanced at Di Qiong and Di Xia. His heart skipped a beat. My lord, when is the next chosen one battle? Oh, I would like to represent the 3rd zone in the battle. As he spoke, he took a few steps forward. He was 3 meters away from Di Xia. Di Qiong said, it will be a long time later. By then you will be qualified to participate. Don't worry. Thank you, my lord. Lu Yin replied. At the same time, he merged into Di Xia's body. If it was the consciousness energy of the people in the game of 1,000 faces, Lu Yin would not dare to release it in front of Di Qiong. Although they were both consciousness energy, Lu Yin relied on the die's characteristic of 6 enhance. It was fundamentally different from the people in the game of 1,000 faces who used consciousness to control others. The die with 5 enhance could absorb the flames from the Book of Destiny and the lightning from the Thunder Lord. Lu Yin was confident that Di Qiong would not notice anything wrong with the die. After merging into Di Xia's body, Lu Yin immediately self-destructed. He had merged into Di Xia's body once before, so he had some understanding of Di Xia's strength. At the moment of self-destruction, Di Xia suddenly vomited blood and fell to the ground. Di Qiong was shocked. Di Xia, what happened? Lu Yin was shocked. Di Xia? He had failed. Di Xia did not self-destruct. It was not that Lu Yin did not understand Di Xia's strength, but that he could not do it. Just as he had guessed, some experts were immortal. Even if they wanted to die, it was not that easy. Lu Yin could kill Di Xia, but he could not do it in an instant. It was the same when he controlled Muji. Whether it was divine energy or the wood spacetime energy, he could not control others to commit suicide. Di Xia lay on the ground, panting heavily. What happened? Di Xia did not know. At that moment, the energy in his body was about to explode. It felt like he was going to self-destruct. But why did he self-destruct? It was obvious that it was not under his control. Cough. Di Xia kept coughing up blood. Di Qiong pressed his hand on Di Xia's shoulder. His eyes flickered and his face turned pale. How did you get injured? Di Xia said in a hoarse voice. I don't know. Di Qiong shouted. Who is your opponent? The cicada tribe. Di Qiong's face turned pale. Your strength has been manipulated. The cicada tribe has such an ability. This subordinate has already exterminated the cicada race. Di Qiong did not care about the cicada tribe. He was thinking about how to deal with the Chosen One battle. Di Xia's injury was inexplicable. It must have something to do with the cicada tribe. Regardless of how he got injured, what should he do in the Chosen One battle? Participating in the Chosen One battle with such an injury was no longer a question of whether he could pass the test. It was a question of whether he could come back alive. Even if there was no bet, Di Qiong did not want to lose Di Xia. Di Xia was too important in the Third Calamity region. Did he have to give up on the Chosen One battle? Di Qiong looked at Di Xia coughing up blood. The energy in his body was in a mess. It would be good if he could use half of his strength. Even Yi Bo could kill him now. Wait, Yi Bo. Di Qiong looked at Lu Yin. Lu Yin felt Di Qiong's gaze and looked at him. My lord, with Di Xia's injury, if he participates in the Chosen One battle. I know. Yi Bo, how is your injury? Lu Yin replied. My injury is not serious. I will be fine after a few days of rest. Di Qiong looked at Lu Yin and then at Di Xia. Yi Bo, you will take Di Xia's place in the Chosen One battle. Lu Yin was shocked. Me? Di Qiong looked at Lu Yin. Di Xia is not fit to participate in the Chosen One battle. You will take his place. Chapter 3074. Hearing Di Qiong's words, Lu Yin hesitated. But I have already failed. No one has seen Di Xia's face. Di Qiong did not mind. This was also Lu Yin's consideration. The only way for him to participate in the Chosen of Gods was to kill Di Xia and take his place. Based on his understanding of Di Qiong would never give up on the Chosen of Gods. Even if he knew that he could not win, he would still fight for it. The result was just as he had expected. I am willing to work for you, but this is the result. Do your best. Luck is also very important in the Chosen One battle. Di Qiong's tone was unpleasant. Obviously, he did not have much hope for the battle. Even if Lu Yin had an artistic conception battle technique, he could not change the overall situation. Di Qiong's strength was not something Lu Yin could compare to. If Di Qiong had the artistic conception battle technique, Lu Yin would not have lost to Qiu. Di Qiong could only hope that the two in the second zone of calamity would not pass the test. Otherwise he would lose Wu Tian. Not long after, Lu Yin appeared in a new appearance. It was Di Qiong in a black robe. Di Qiong could not accept the fact that the third zone of calamity would be defeated so easily. He had no choice but to let Lu Yin disguise himself as Di Qiong. He reminded Lu Yin, try your best to last a few days in the Chosen One battle. If you can't, run away. Di Qiong had participated in the Chosen One battle before. He had reached his current position through the Chosen One battle, so he knew how cruel it was. Lu Yin also learned from Di Qiong that the Chosen One battle's test was held in Immortal City. He suppressed his excitement. He was finally going to see Immortal City. He did not expect to see it as an eternal when he could not see it as a human. Immortal City was a mysterious place for humans. No one had ever returned from Immortal City. The only person who had come out of Immortal City was Chu Yi. However, he did not come back. Instead, he went to the Six Direction Association to mediate and prevent the Lu family from fighting with the great heavenly masters. Heroes were not judged by their cultivation. They would fight to the death in Immortal City. This was Immortal City. Seeing Immortal City was equivalent to seeing many human powerhouses who had gone missing or died. He could also see the Eternal Race's bone boat. Immortal City was the place where many human powerhouses gathered. The bone boat was the Eternal Race's strongest weapon to deal with Immortal City, or rather to attack it. Lu Yin was going to see all of this. A few days later, Lu Yin and Di Qiong broke through the void and entered a new land in the Calamity region. Before he left, Di Qiong had told him that he was in the second zone of disaster. They would be led to Immortal City by the second Lord of Calamity region, one of the three pillars, End of Ruins. Lu Yin had not expected the Lord of Zone of Yi to be one of the three pillars. The three pillars and 6 Daoists corresponded to the 6 Daoists of the three realms. Of the 3 realms and 6 Daoists, only the 6 Daoists were the masters of a continent. The 3 realms were not. The Eternals had clearly changed. The second zone of calamity did not look too different from the third zone of calamity. It was still a dark land with endless rivers of divine power. Far away there was the Eternal Kingdom. Tall towers stood in the direction of the Black Mother Tree. Above their heads there were stargates. Under the Black Mother Tree there was a huge dark cloud. When Lu Yin and the others arrived, they saw that there were already people there. Lu Yin immediately saw two familiar faces, Sovereign Xiaoyin and Wang Fan. He had expected Reverend Xiaoyin to be one of the participants in the Chosen of God's battle, but he did not expect Wang Fan to be one as well. It seemed that he was doing well in the first zone of calamity. Moreover, he was very confident in himself and dared to participate in the Chosen of God's battle. Aside from them, there were two other people who attracted his attention. One had her hair tied up in blue ponytails. The other was a little girl with two ponytails. She was about a meter tall and wore a blue princess dress with black leather boots and white socks. She held a teddy bear in her arms. No matter how one looked at her, she looked like a child. Lu Yin did not dare to underestimate her, as appearances were meaningless. The more harmless a person's appearance was, the more terrifying they were. The fact that this girl could represent the zone of calamity region meant that she had killed her opponent in the previous trial. Even Lu Yin had failed that trial as Yi Bo. There was another person who was even stranger. He was completely covered in black cloth and had a human face. His entire body was covered in black cloth. This person was different from Lu Yin's disguise as Xia. Xia had wrapped himself in a black robe, and his appearance could not be seen clearly. However, Lu Yin felt that this person was just a piece of black cloth. How could a piece of black cloth become a spirit? Lu Yin was stunned. End of ruins. Are these two the representatives from the second zone of calamity region? Diqiong was stunned as well. There were occasional interactions between the calamities, but the three masters and six boundless rarely visited the other calamities. Diqiong remembered that the last time he had been to the second zone of calamity region was 1,000 years ago. It was a relatively long time ago, but it was not a long time for them. A single session of seclusion could last thousands or even tens of thousands of years. Dark clouds covered the sky, revealing an eyeball. Hee, what do you think? Not bad, right? Diqiong looked at the girl with two ponytails and then at the black cloth. Each one is stranger than the last. Hee, this is interesting, isn't it? Is that Xia? Diqiong raised an eyebrow and did not speak. The eyeball slowly descended and approached Lu Yin. Lu Yin's heartbeat slowed down and he felt a little nervous. He did not know if this person could see through his disguise as Xia. However, Lu Yin was afraid that this person could see through his disguise as Xia. The eyeball kept descending and staring at Lu Yin. Diqiong frowned and blocked in front of Lu Yin. What, are you trying to scare my people? The eyeball turned and stared at Diqiong. And that is Xia. Are you sure? The eyeball was doubtful. Diqiong's eyes narrowed. The eyeball rolled a few times. Right, if you say so. Diqiong, don't forget about the bet. Hee, I'm looking forward to Wu Tian's arrival in the second zone of calamity region. Wu Tian. The Xiaoyin divinity and Wang Fan exclaimed. Wu Tian was nothing to those who did not know him, but to those from the Six Direction Society, it was shocking. Wu Tian was a legend. May I ask where Wu Tian is? The Xiaoyin divinity could not help but ask. The eyeball turned to the Xiaoyin divinity. Why do you want to join the bet? What bet? Wang Fan was puzzled. Diqiong was indifferent. They are not qualified. The eyeball moved as if it was laughing. Don't say that. Those who can participate in the Chosen One battle have their own abilities. Once they pass, they will be on the same level as you and I. Diqiong did not care. After so many years, how many people have actually passed the Chosen One battle? How many have survived until now? Let's talk about it after they return from Immemorial City. At that moment, the void distorted as three figures walked out. The one in the lead was the Arrow God, a top-notch expert with long crimson hair who had suppressed the entire battlefield with his archery skills. Only the triumphant Celestial had been able to resist him due to his extreme reaction. The others, including Void Master, had not been able to do so. There were two people behind the Arrow God. One of them was an old man with a gloomy expression. One could tell from his narrow eyes that he was not a good person, and he was all skin and bones. His head was filled with a strange aura, as if he had been starving for days. The other person was the complete opposite of the old man. He was a handsome man wearing a white ceremonial robe and a tall white hat. He had a modest smile on his face and looked very comfortable. He looked like a complete gentleman. None of the participants of the Chosen of Gods looked like normal people. The Arrow God is here. If I'm not mistaken, 2 of the 5 elders are behind you, the eyeball said with a smile. The Arrow God's expression was cold as his gaze swept past everyone. Finally, he fixed his gaze on the girl with the blue twin tails and the human-shaped black cloth. Lonlongi. Aside from them, there are no other experts in the second zone of Calamity region. Experts are valued for their quality, not their quantity. The eyeball rolled. The Arrow God's gaze fell on Lu Yin. His Majesty, Di Qiong was even colder than the Arrow God. In terms of the number of experts, the 5th zone of Calamity region has the most. The 5 elders, a total of 5 sequence law realm experts, which 2 are participating in this battle. The Arrow God did not answer. Behind her, the gentleman-like man stepped forward and bowed slowly. Magician. Greetings, seniors. The girl with the blue twin tails pointed at the man in surprise. What a good-looking guy. You're magician? The man straightened up and smiled at the girl with the blue twin tails. Yes, I'm magician. The girl with the blue twin tails was excited. That's great. Finally, they're normal people. They're all monsters. Hi, I'm Lon Lon. Hello, Lon Lon. Hello, big brother. Beside magician, the gloomy old man said in a low and hoarse voice, De Huang. Greetings, seniors. Di Qiong stared at the old man. The leader of the 5 elders, De Huang? The old man bowed, his bones almost piercing through his skin. Greetings, Lord Di Qiong. Di Qiong looked at the Arrow God. Sometimes I envy you. You have 5 sequence law realm experts under you. The Arrow God said coldly, you have quite a few too. The eyeballs rolled. The 4th zone of Calamity region suffered the most. He Wuxian stayed in the 1st zone for a long time, causing the 4th zone to only have 1 sequence law realm expert. He even died. The guy from the 4th zone of Calamity region was the first to be killed. What about the 6th zone of Calamity region? The Arrow God asked. The eyeballs stared at the Arrow God and Di Qiong at the same time. Ji Luo. The Arrow God frowned. Ji Luo? Will he participate? I'm not sure. He didn't participate in the last battle of Calamity region. It's different this time. The zombie god almost died. Just as he finished speaking, a figure walked out of the void and appeared in front of everyone. Lu Yin looked over and was stunned. So fast. As soon as they saw the figure had already appeared in front of everyone. He was very sure that the figure didn't pass through the void. It was simply fast. The newcomer wore a straw hat with a few red ribbons hanging down from it. He was dressed in tattered clothes, straw sandals, and a pure black sword hung from his waist. He looked like a downtrodden sword cultivator, but his arrival caused the magician's smile to vanish and De Huang to straighten his back. Lu Yin also felt an extraordinary threat from this person. This person was not simple. It's really Ji Luo. The eyeballs rolled and slowly approached the newcomer. Ji Luo, I heard that the zombie god died. Is it true? The downtrodden swordsman was called Ji Luo. Di Qiong and the rest had guessed it before he appeared. It seemed that this person would definitely win.